Monsters, creatures, legends. You know them. You slay them. But do you ever get to play them? Sure, defeating a giant in single combat, solving a sphinx's riddle, or even outwitting a devil is a lot of fun. But what if you were the giant, sphinx, or devil? What if you could become the monster? Well, now you can. Continuing the tradition of Year of Monsters, Roll for Combat is proud to present the Year of Legends. Every month, you'll receive a new legendary creature that you can play as a character for either 5e or Pathfinder. Now you too can play as a fallen angel, a stony gargoyle, a brain-eating seraphage, an ocular evil eye, a towering giant, a teeming swarmblood, a moon-blessed were-creature, a tree-like arboreal, a miraculous golemborn, an accursed lamia, an ominous psychopomp, or a riddling sphinx. You can get all this for less than a cup of coffee every month. But don't delay. If you back the Year of Legends Kickstarter now, you'll receive Devils, a bonus 13th ancestry at the start of the new year. These infernal creatures from hell are the perfect complement to January's other ancestry, Angels. If you back the Kickstarter today, you'll receive both Devils and Angels to kick off 2024. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until 2025 for the Devils to appear. So, won't you give monster characters a chance? Back the Year of Legends today.
So I can't hear it at least.
Well, good thing we're live.
We're live and I can't hear your gardener. It's perfect, Steven.
I know. I was like, we're going live in 3 seconds too, and I hear, I'm like, there goes the gardener.
Typical.
Well, that's why I got this mic. It's like, it's not as cool as everyone else's, who has the fancy mics, but it's very good in noisy environments, which is why I like it. You could have dogs barking, gardeners literally right outside, and you can't hear a thing. But it doesn't work well if you're trying to sing in a high-pitched voice, because then it cuts off. Anyhow,
there you go.
Welcome to day 5,000 of the Pathfinder Remaster review.
Out of 5,001.
Out of 5,000.
Tomorrow we have... Yeah, this is Wizard, and tomorrow we have Rules Lawyer for GM Core, and then that's it.
That's it.
Then I will enter the Odin sleep to sleep off all of this, and then try to get a lot of other Roll for Combat stuff done.
Yeah, but you know what? You secretly got work done because you needed to learn all about the new changes anyhow. So
you're right. Knowing about every minute change in what the feats do for the classes maybe was like not as necessary since we're not doing things that like alter the classes as much, but it was still useful.
It still was. Doesn't hurt us. So today we have Anto.
Hello, people.
Hello, Anto. Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Devouring remastered stuff, and then sleep. A lot of sleep as well. A lot of Odin sleep.
No, okay. Well, sounds like you're busy. What did you... I said to you, oh, do you want to join us? And you're like, oh, I want the wizard. I want the wizard. That's your favorite class?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily my favorite class, but I do like the wizard, and I thought that there was some pretty cool changes, and it was one of the ones that it's the last one in the book. It was the one I'd most recently read when you were like, which one do you want to do? And I was like, this one's most fresh in my mind.
Cool.
That was like 2 weeks ago though, so we'll see how much I've retained.
Oh no. Well, Mark is good at
I will list the things, so as long as you've retained opinions, then we're gonna have a good conversation. And wizard is probably the one that I think there's most like back and forth discourse out of all of them so far. So there's probably a lot to say, even though there's not as many changes as the cleric, just because the cleric is so long with all those domains that there's just a lot of things that it could be changed and were. Wizard still has a lot. And it has the only thing where, because of the OGL changes and schools being removed, like an entire section was replaced with something else.
Yeah.
Well, I have good news. Not only are we going to go through the wizard, we're going to go through every single spell in the game.
We're not going through every single spell in the game.
Oh, okay. We can do that next week, Mark.
We do. Yeah, we can. We could do it next week. We start on Monday at 3 p.m. and we continue streaming until Friday.
Non-stop.
Friday at 3 p.m. with never sleeping, never eating, never leaving to go to the bathroom, only going through every spell in the game.
A day. We can do A on Monday, then B.
You could do that. Yeah, we could do what some of the letters could be combined. So I think it would only take 1 month to get through.
And if you only did the spells that had changed, then, you know, you might be down to like 2 weeks of streams. You'd be fine.
Well, Derek did that, but Derek did it by level, I think. He did every level for every school. So he would do like all the level 1. I forgot how he did it. And then he ranked them. So not only to go through every single one in detail, but then it ranked every single spell.
Dedication, man.
I was on one of the streams where he did 9th and 10th. He combined them because there's not that many 10th levels.
But I don't think he was just going through them and quickly talking about each one. I don't think he was like combing through them with a fine-tooth comb and doing like single word changes for the remaster, right?
Yes, you don't. Not for the remaster, but for the original. You don't watch Derek's. He probably has 100 hours in just this alone, because it took him like a year to get through this.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
He goes through.
I know he gave analysis of power level for each one.
It was all the same. It was all the same stream.
That's fair enough. So
and then he did every archetype. There you go. He did every class,
we could do that
everything.
too. That could be a year of content.
You know what?
Let's not do that.
We're not going to do that. I don't
think
it's enough content. Well, we have other content. Trust me. There's enough going on in the world of RPGs that we don't need to go through every
The RPG world is just getting more and more I'm going to say interesting because that's a more neutral term for it.
That's a good term.
I don't want to like put a biased term on it, even though in the modern, I feel like in the 2020s, the way that things have been interesting are more in the like the ancient Chinese curse, you shall live in interesting times, interesting, but they have been interesting, something that you want to pay attention to, possibly for your own good.
Yeah, wait until next
Something you can't help but pay attention to a lot of the time. Like,
wait until next year. This is the easy year. Wait until next year.
Oh yeah, no, I'm terrified about next year, Steven. So
I'm not terrified. I'm excited. Endless content for us.
Just non-stop streaming.
Wait, endless content for us.
Yes.
I'm not even just talking about us next year. I'm talking about the us that is spelled U.S. I suppose.
Well, for us, as in U.S. Yeah. Well, there's a lot because there's also a million new games coming out.
No, you're right about that.
Like
and D&D is doing their thing, but
the Stormlight.
Game,
I'm actually
Stormlight was, I think, announced.
Interested in that.
It was announced days after we did a stream where like one of the guests was just like, or you, Steven, was just like, what would your property that you want to do on it? I said Stormlight, I think would make a good one.
Yeah,
I'm surprised there isn't one. And then like the next week they announced the Stormlight RPG, and I was like, there we go.
And
so I thought so.
That I'm very interested in.
How's there been a Mistborn RPG?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, there was.
Logan worked on the Mistborn RPG, actually.
Because I'd be way more interested in like the Mistborn magic system to play as a player than Stormlight mechanically. If I was looking at the two of them, I was like, Mistborn, I can immediately think of how the mechanics would translate in my mind versus Stormlight.
Well, Stormlight has 10 schools, and you always get 2 of them. That's how it works.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mistborn, if you're in the like combined Aloe Pharaoh, though, there's some combinations where it would just be like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't give this to the players because they're basically invincible unless the enemies use very, very shenanigans tactics against them because of the combination of 2 things that they have.
I thought,
like the one dude had that like gave him basically infinite regeneration because of the combination of the 2 things that he had.
embedded copper mines and things.
Yes.
Well, well, the Mistborn, so that one kind of came and went. I don't know what happened to that one. But you know what? I was reading about someone posted something about how they were super excited because they got this brand new RPG in the mail. And
What was it?
I have never heard of this in my entire life. And then people who posted were like, I have never heard, like, all these people were like, and
I
was
bet
like,
Derek's heard of it. He's heard of a lot. What was it called?
It has something to do with like ship fighting or away missions or something. It was very.
Oh, you don't know the name, so we can't
I'm
find
trying to
out.
find it right now because it was
Okay.
it was on Facebook. So
Well, while you're looking for it,
Oh,
let's
no,
talk
yes.
about what people's incentives are to like. So, Anto will do a dramatic reading in a character voice if 100 people like our wizard stream.
We can do
And we-
that.
yeah, this
So,
is,
That will be a challenge for now. So we'll have to see if we can get there together. We've done it so far every other stream. So will wizard just be the one class that doesn't? Is the contention on wizard too high?
Everyone's like, no, I will not. Not for wizard.
Not for wizard. I don't know. Wizard was has always been my favorite class since early D&D. It was the one I always played. And nowadays in Pathfinder, there's so many good classes that there are other ones that I play too. But I really like wizard as well.
yeah, I'm gonna probably have to spell. You guys are talking about wizard. I'll look for this book. But
Yeah, you can look for it while we talk about wizard. Do you want to give another spiel where
I'll
you
give
tell
the
people how
spiel.
good our
I'll
animated
give the
tokens
standard
are?
Spiel is that. Whoops.
Okay.
That's the wrong spiel. Whoops, that's the wrong spiel. There we go. I'm a
Now
mess
we have a
today.
spiel.
Here's the schedule. Can't believe it. We're finally at the end almost. Tomorrow we have the rules lawyer. And we'll talk about the DM core. Sorry, GM.
GM core.
DM, GM, whatever core. There's lots of names for the what's your favorite name? I've heard people called the GM, the DM. I've heard the what is it?
I like almost every name I've seen except referee. I just don't like it. So I'm just going to call that out as one that's bad.
Yeah,
I like
GM or DM doesn't bother
storyteller,
me.
all of those are fine.
Wasn't there like the story master?
Yeah, storyteller's fine.
Storyteller.
Some random other word before master that's based on your game is okay too. Narrator, there's a whole bunch of different ones. I just don't like referee because it makes it sound like they are not participating other than to call out rules violations or something like that.
They are just the arbitrator sitting neutral in the middle.
Yes, exactly. And it's so inaccurate, and I think leads to it makes social contracts for the table harder and leads to people misunderstanding the role of the GM. And so basically any name I've seen, no matter how goofy or serious or whatever, is fine with me except for referee.
Okay. And then of course we have our Kickstarter. Yay! Do you have Kickstarters, Anto?
I don't have one going at the minute. I'm in the middle of fulfilling mine at the minute. That's why I've been sleeping so much, because I've been packing boxes. Those tokens look awesome.
Oh.
It's just popped up on my screen.
Yeah.
Those are really cool.
Yes, you too can have over 200, who knows, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of these animated tokens all over the place.
It's going to be over 200 now. That's twice as many as we originally thought. Is it because there's more versions?
Well, I'm giving a lot of versions. So
yeah, that's what I thought.
I'm going to give
that makes total sense.
We're going to make lots and lots and lots of versions. I mean, this isn't even all the angels. This is only
three of the angels.
That's only 3 of the 7 angels. So that's and then I snuck the cerebrophage in there just to show you because it looks.
I mean, I just like how all the little tentacles in the cloak are doing their thing.
Yeah. And as I said, I mean, these are actually I saved them pretty big. I saved them something like 2,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels. So these things are super high quality. I just I'm trying to decide how big to make them. That's something we have to figure out because they can get pretty big. You don't want to have too many of these on the screen. But this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 on the screen, and it's fine. It's not it actually animates smoother in Foundry than you're seeing on the screen right now. So
No, they look really nice.
well,
And I can attest to how great the static ones look because I've got the Battle Zoo Foundry pack and I use that all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
Which
they
one
look
do
great.
you use? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've got the Battle Zoo Bestiary and I think I've got the Dragon Ancestry. I think I've got Year of the Monsters as well.
Oh.
So I've seen a bunch of the static ones.
Well, we're updating them all. Well, not the animated, but we're probably updating the tokens. I'm getting through it one at a time, but I did update them slowly because we have this new style and new method. So I did that, and I redid the interface for dragons. Did I redo the interface for dragons? I don't remember.
I don't know.
Blur.
You
Who
might
knows?
have. You do so much.
I'm always doing. Who knows? And one day I do what most people do in a month, so I can't even remember what I did yesterday, let alone a month ago. All I know is we're always updating.
But then one day you do what people do in a month, and a month later, sometimes there's an entire year of products in between what used to be the next product and the current product, and you never know what's going to happen.
Dude,
it's a mystery.
We released 34, 36 books this year.
Yeah, I know.
People are excited when they release one. Although, Anto, you release one a month, so you're in our camp. You do 12, 13
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call them books. They're zines. They're significantly smaller than what you guys are putting out. Like,
well, 24.
Do not give me more credit than I deserve here.
Quote, zine size.
Yeah, 24 of ours are probably zine size. They may even be smaller than your zines. But the other 12...
The other 12 are 300 to 400 pages each. So I would say they're real books.
They're usually more like 200.
No.
But we've done one. No, I mean, we've done some that are, but they're usually more like 200.
2 or 200-ish. The World of
Which
Battle
one
Zoo,
other than...
World of Battle Zoo is 300 pages for 5e.
Yeah,
it's
and Jewel.
286
Jewel is
for
ridiculous,
Pathfinder.
right?
I had to do this gargantuan monstrosity.
Yeah, I was thinking of Jewel and World of Battle Zoo as the big ones.
I don't even know how many pages. It's
enough pages that you could kill someone with it.
436 pages.
It's enough pages that
1,000 words.
When
each.
FBI Most Wanted came up to Steven's door and he used his Pathfinder core rulebook to try to block bullets, he didn't have his Jewel of the Indigo Isles yet, but now he could use Jewel of the Indigo Isles to do it.
Yes.
It's so weird that a Most Wanted came to your door and you held up the Pathfinder core rulebook. That was...
Anyhow, if you want these really cool animated tokens and Devils a year early, you get to play Devils and Angels in 6-7 weeks. I mean, pretty soon. And Anto, when you see, I just started. I'm almost done with the layout. Intelligent weapons.
Intelligent weapons.
My God, I have spent how much? We have probably spent between me and Mark dozens and dozens of hours on this one ancestry alone. Holy crap.
Even just from Steven going for corner cases, it's been quite a number of hours, let alone the actual main design phase, which also had corner cases, because your weapon, it's pretty different.
It is... Well, I was saying to Mark and I were talking last night, like 11 o'clock at night, still working on it, and we're like, there's nothing that we have to put in all the rules because there's nothing to compare this to. It's not like you can use these existing rules like you often do in RPGs.
That's correct. I will excerpt a message that from 1:44 a.m.
There we go.
All right. The message is everything's in the Pathfinder 2 file. Let me know if you find any other corner cases, and I'll handle them tomorrow after prepping Wizard. That was from me. And then Steven did not find any other corner cases. So in the morning, I sent an emoji of like a celebration emoji and said I can go back to the 5e and try to put in some of those corner cases.
This is going to be up there. I thought Dungeons was cool. This one actually will easily surpass Dungeons because you get to literally... Not only do you get to play a weapon, but there's so many ways to play this weapon. It's I don't want to give away spoilers, but however many ways you think you've seen it in movies, you can do it. You know, you can be your own weapon. You can be wielded by someone. You can be you and your friend could play together if you really wanted to. You could have like one of you playing the character, and one of you
Yes, we
playing
have
the
that,
weapon.
which is where you're not really an ancestry at
Right.
all. You're just an item.
You're
because
just an
some people
item.
were like, I just want to be an item. I don't really.
Right.
I know your book is called Battles with Ancestries, Intelligent Weapons, and I'm supposed to be an ancestry with my own class and be able to move my character, but I actually don't want that.
Yeah.
I'd rather just be a sword.
I just want to be carried around and not think.
And use my activations. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, and then the best one was,
and we've got that too.
And then I will get into this, is because we're talking about spoilers for the Intelligent Weapons Ancestry that comes out in like 2.5 weeks. Is if you, and that's your monsters, is that I was like, well, what happens if I want to be a frying pan? Or like a mug of ale, because anything could be a weapon. And then
I could an improvised weapon sidebar, but I found out that frying pan's already a non-improvised weapon too.
I was thinking if I play this, I'm going to be a frying pan.
So you can do that without my sidebar, but I did add a sidebar for like a mug of ale.
That's right. So you can be a mug of ale, and we because anything can be a weapon. So we had to put in rules for how do you become a intelligent mug of ale.
There you go.
And weapon. It's going to be the craziest thing you've ever seen.
Trying to describe what you do as a job when you make TTRPGs is so hard anyway. But trying to describe your job when what you do is make intelligent weapons as an ancestry must be so much more difficult. Like you're at a party and someone's like, oh, what you do? Like, don't even ask. Like, it'd take me too long to explain.
Dude, the other thing I do is technology. So I'm like, don't bother. You won't get it.
No, explaining their job is always funny. I remember right after the time when the Paizo union representative was meeting with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they also had like Amazon and other unions. One of the other people from the union posted a picture showing them with a caption at the bottom that said, one of these people has a day job where they tell people which kind of pretend elves they get to pretend to be at public events.
Actually, we have a question. Can intelligent weapon wield a weapon?
So it depends on which kind of intelligent weapon you are. You'll have to get the intelligent weapons to find out. If you are just an animated weapon that's floating around, then no, because you are just that weapon. You're not holding anything else.
Yeah.
And we deal with the situation where you need arrows because you're a bow. We've got that. It's one of our many corner cases.
There's a lot of corner. It's all corner cases of this one because it's
all right. So shall we move into the wizard?
I even had to have like, how do you talk? And we had to put something on that. It's like everything you can think of. We tried to.
Oh my god!
We've got it. We've got it all.
How do you cast spells? How do you drink potions? All that stuff. It's all in there.
Well, you're fine for most of them, but the animated weapon specifically does not use a lot of held things.
Weirder
so
than
it
the
has
dungeon?
more limitation.
Way weirder. But I'll get you. So we figured this out, and then I'll stop. You can finally play Dungeons and Dragons because you can.
You always could because the dungeon could have a dragon avatar.
Yeah, but you couldn't have the and. But you can name your animated weapon and then you can play a dungeon ancestry as the wielder of you, and then the dungeon can use the dragon as its avatar. So you can truly be a dungeon and dragon.
There you go.
And
so
it totally makes sense.
Let's move on to the wizard. Wizard is a class that is the class that got the first remaster preview from a blog and also had the most acrimony online, by which I mean it had like probably 100 times more acrimony online than all of the other class ones combined, because most of them did not have almost any acrimony online after their previews, and Wizard had a lot. That is because of the fact that the wizard changes include a change, which I will get to shortly, that is one of the biggest changes and one of the only ones that was not like strictly a buff, which is schools of magic were removed from the game entirely for OGL reasons, and this highly affected wizards. So we'll get into that. But first, as usual, we'll start from the very top of the class. So base proficiencies. Hallelujah. Wizards can use all simple weapons. Yes, this doesn't help them that much, but it was always so sad that they were the only class in the game that had a weird limited list of simple weapons that did not have all of the simple weapons.
Or they use a
There's so
frying
many-
pan.
No, actually, a frying pan I think is not a simple weapon. When I looked it up,
Really? And that's like the most iconic thing you see wizards use. Is frying
yeah, but
pans.
it. Oh no, it looks like it is a simple weapon. Never mind,
There
it
you
is a
go.
simple weapon. I was like, why it was fatal, so
It
I
is a
thought it
simple
wasn't, but
weapon.
it is a simple weapon. There you go. It's in Treasure Vault.
There you go.
It was under halfling weapon familiarity, which is why I thought it wasn't simple, because you wouldn't need a weapon familiarity if it was simple, but it turns out it was simple, and I just was not reading it well enough. So you can now be a wizard with a frying pan if you want to live out your I don't know, like what major characters used a frying pan as their weapon.
Sam is the only character that I can ever think of with a frying pan, but he's not a wizard.
What about, like, was there in Chrono Cross maybe Lena who used a frying pan, but she's not really a wizard also. So there are some people who use frying pans. In any case,
maybe I'm making that up.
whether you're using a frying pan or not, you have a lot of options for what you want to do now. You don't have to take a extra weapon proficiency feat before going into martial weapons. It's a good quality of life increase for all your friends, the wizards. Sure, a lot of wizards don't care, but the ones who do care are very happy because they kind of got taxed before. All right, so theses are entirely unchanged. I guess I didn't say this for Ranger Hunter's Edges, but the theses and Ranger Hunter's Edge are the only two like sections of similar weight to the class that had literally no changes in them in the entire book. But that's okay because we're going to get into it. Schools got changed a lot. Now we have the usual OGL name changes. Lightning reflexes became reflex expertise. Alertness became perception expertise. By this point, that's old hat for us on this show.
Yep.
Like which magical fortitude stayed the same instead of changing to fortitude expertise like all of the great fortitudes did. And resolve, as usual, became a bespoke name that only the wizard has, in this case, prodigious will. All right, so we got that out of the way. Now let's go into the only other change that is in the class chassis for wizard, which is schools. Now, before I dig into this, we've usually been doing the focus spells at the end, but like with witches, where the patrons changed, and I specifically did the patron spells with the patron, I'd like us to talk about the school spells with the new schools, because I think it's relevant to like the identity and the theme of each of the new schools to see what their school spells are. And there are no other school spells, so we will not have school spells at the end since we'll do them during the schools. All right, so originally in Pathfinder 2nd edition, just like in Pathfinder 1st and D&D, there were 8 schools of magic that divided all of magic into those 8 schools. Now, this was kind of a problem. The reason it was kind of a problem was because that there's 4 traditions of magic. It's got all these different kinds. There are only 8 schools of it, and wizards get to be the best, supposedly, at all 8 of them, depending on which school they pick. So there can't be any niche or field of magic that is really being entirely withheld from wizards, because all 8 of those divisions have a wizard specialization. Fundamentally, this limits design space for other spellcasters. It means it's harder to make a necromancer-based class because there's already a necromancer wizard, an illusionist-based class, but there's already an illusionist wizard, and so on and so forth. We did summoner, but that's because it's not just a conjurer who conjures with summon spells. It has this whole eidolon. It had to have a different identity. So now, because of removing spell schools, the 8 spell schools, they kept the name schools and they tied it to something that makes more sense to a new player, probably who's never played any of these games before, which is we care about what school of magic you graduated from. Was it the Arcanum, the Magambia? Like, where did you go to school? And each of those schools have different philosophies that have a list with 2 spells of every rank, except for 9th has only 1. And you have to take your spells from those listed spells. So normally, That's fewer, especially late in the edition cycle when you just get more and more. You get like creep of options, and every school of magic has like 20 spells in it by the time the edition's at the end. So it's going to be much fewer by then. If you look at only the core, there were some spell schools that did not have 2 at all levels. And so it's actually an increase for them in certain ways. But that's sort of how it goes now. Other than that, it works the same as Wizard schools, although Universalist has been described as being a school, but it was not changed. So that's my general overview for how it was done. With one more comment, and then I wanna hear your take on it after I make that last comment, Anto, before we go into each one. The one comment is some of these schools' spells include uncommon spells. And they even describe the superscript U gives the uncommon spells. Some of them are some of the most disruptive uncommon spells in the game that the GM would be most likely to try to not let you have unless they wanted you to have them. So I find it unusual because PF2, all of the books up to this point, some of those spells, there was no way to get access to them other than the GM's permission. And I feel like they could have used a note after defining superscript U where they said, look, they said they were uncommon, but they'd be like, oh, you know, the schools that grant them maybe are uncommon, or you should talk to your GM if they want to replace them. So what do you think about this whole school revamp?
I am a huge fan of it. I feel like, based on a certain segment of the internet and the response to it, and when it was previewed initially, I might be in the minority in that, but I'm a big fan of it. I never liked the traditional 8 schools of magic. It never gelled with me properly, and this newer approach of it being an actual school makes much more sense to me in how it plays into the idea of the wizard being the learned spellcaster, and you having something mechanically that backs up the fact that your wizard is a learned spellcaster. They come from a school of learning, and you get something mechanical that backs up that learning aspect of your character. You went to a school, you get a segment of spells from it, and I think it opens the door for really interesting narrative design space for making new schools of magic specific to your world, specific to new publications that come out in Paizo's lineup. They can bring out new books with loads of really new, interesting magic schools. But I do think, like you said, that they could have benefited from adding the rarity tags to the schools themselves, just to kind of cover the GM's backs, to be like, we're going to put some interesting and spicy spells in here, so we're just going to give GMs the hard final say on these by making the schools themselves uncommon or rare. I mean, yeah, the GM gets the final say anyway, but it would have been a nice to have.
Yeah. So it can sometimes be interesting when we have guests who disagree, but I'm going to have to say I agree with you on that. I tried to present it first and then not give my opinion to hear yours first, but I like it a lot. It's so, you covered one of the biggest games, which is the 8 schools are in there. They're done, though. You can try to make another school later, but if you do, it's weird, it's artificial. It's never future-proofed unless you commit to constantly redefining spells into that school in the future for of the 8 schools from the original. So it's set. It's just like that. You're done. Wizard is day one has blocked itself up for any expansion in that way. Whereas with these schools, you have infinite expansion possibility. You can put them in the back. Like imagine these schools existed before Strength of Thousands Adventure Pass. You could have a different school with curriculum for each of the 5 branches of the Magambia and be like, yeah, this is the Tempest Sun Mages one. In fact, I'm going to start a Strength of Thousand game one of these days, but I'm spending like a million years doing pre-prep of like, because the first book, it takes like 2 school years to get through it, but it doesn't have a lot of stuff that happens. So I was like, no, I need to fill these school years with other events and side adventures. And while I'm doing that, maybe I'll write 5 wizard curricula for those branches. And I'm excited about that. It makes me excited to expand a class I love, which is the wizard. I know it's weaker technically than having 20 choices when the edition expands later on. It is. people who say it's definitely not weaker, it is a little weaker because you have fewer choices, but it's so thematically brilliant.
And in decoupling the traditional 8 schools of magic and moving away to the now like the 4 primary traditions and moving away to the new like schools of magic for wizard, by separating out from the past, Paizo have the opportunity to bring in all kinds of new stuff to give wizards a boost or tweak wizard power levels in any way that they see fit in the future, and they don't have to worry about how do they interact with the old spell schools and all of that old baggage that they're bringing along. They can be like, okay, we're going to bring out a whole book dedicated to wizards, and we're going to really dive into the process of writing your wizard's thesis and give you a whole bunch of rules and mechanics around that, because that was something that I really liked in the original PF2 core rule book, that it gave you a little bit of guidance on the fact that your spell book is this thesis that you've been writing because you are an academic spellcaster. And this
I'm glad you enjoyed that text. I'm glad you enjoyed that text. I added that during the final pass on the wizard after the playtest. All that stuff and the weirdly long named thesis name that was based off of ones I've read, because I was in academia before in gaming. That one's still in there, although sadly the sample spellbook structure and interpretation of magic, I think, was taken out, which I heard one of my friends who was still at MIT, like, brought his book in to, like, the professor who wrote, like, the seminal computer science textbook structure and interpretation of computer programs. I was like, look, structure and interpretation of magic was said to be a basic magic textbook. And the professor was like, okay, I don't care. So I'm glad to hear it.
But it gives so much more flavor, because wizard has always been the learned spellcaster, but there's not a huge amount to that beyond just, you learning spells and preparing them in a spell book. But all of those little elements of flavor, and then having the schools now and getting the curriculum spells, all of these little layers make it much easier for someone that's brand new to TTRPGs, brand new to PF2, to conceptualize, I know what my wizard is about. I know what kind of character this is. I know what role my character might fit within a party. I might be the bookish one. I might be the more intellectual that's more interested in academia, and I've got a clear path in how my character might think because of all of these kind of touch points that are put throughout the text that might not necessarily have huge mechanical impacts, but they help reinforce the core ideal of the class and what makes the class unique compared to other spellcasters, because there's a lot of spellcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of Wizard's biggest weaknesses, and you caught on to it. I think it shows that you have a deep understanding of where Wizard was at, because from polls and surveys, Paizo had said this before. I have been the person at Paizo who has said it some of the times, which is that we did a survey on the Wizard, like in the playtest and other times, and what we found was that many people considered the Wizard to be an incredibly strong class. There were a few people who just like rated it super low, but it was a small minority. Almost no one rated it in the middle. Yeah. But a lot of people thought it was boring.
Yeah.
That was before thesis. So then we added thesis, make it a little spicier and played up that angle, because it couldn't have enough of an identity, because its identity was being the green-eyed, jealous monster who just demands all the spells from everywhere because I need to be good at all 8 schools. And so there wasn't enough left for Wizard. And you caught on to a zeitgeist that I think most people can't see when you just read the online discourse, because you're hearing the voices from the two extremes, and you don't see that there's actually was a lot of agreement on the fact that they didn't have enough of an identity and that they weren't as interesting, even if they may have had raw power, because like their feats were a good example. Many of their feats, you could load up on spells. You could create Nova turns if you took the right ones, but they weren't as exciting as the sorcerer ones. They didn't make you feel they were interesting. It was just like, oh, yes, well, now I've got 4 more spell slots. Now I've got twice as many spell slots as the druid. How did I do that? I took these 3 feats. That's a lot of spell slots. But the druid is doing these 3 really interesting things.
And by decoupling it from the original schools and by moving away from more of that kind of, it's one of the things that I have been most excited about, both with the original PF2 core and now with the remaster, kind of shedding more and more of that old D&D baggage, is freeing up the design space to say, where can we get interesting with mechanics? Where can we start to add exciting new things and not be held back by some of these older conventions and some of these older things that have just been how it's been for the last 50 years? And being able to go, right, we're really leaning into Wizard as being the scholarly spellcaster. There's all kinds of places that you can take that with new options and presenting things with, like, right, okay, we're going to bring new feats, new specific wizard spells that can only be learned. You can't innately know them. You have to be a learned spellcaster to be able to cast them. Those kind of things to help give even more identity to the wizard as its own distinct spellcasting class.
I could see that. I could see a spell that requires a methodology that only one particular curriculum, only one school. Yeah. If you don't learn to cast from that school, you just can't cast it. I could see that existing, and so like, you can't do it, or maybe you can, but it's like a higher rank of spell or some weird thing like that. That might not work out.
That have the prerequisite of being from a specific wizard school, it immediately gates it off from being super problematic in everyday play because it's a rare spell. But then it means that you are locking it off from anyone that's not a wizard and helping niche out the wizard in the play space by saying, as a wizard, you're just going to get access to some really cool and esoteric magic that no one else can get access to because the wizard has spent all this time in the library researching the ancient knowledge and digging it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this was a good change. And yes, it was a small power decrease. Sometimes it could be significant. It depends. But it also allows calibration. And here's what I mean about calibration. If you've ever played Pathfinder First, and I know you have, Anto, but I don't know, some of the viewers may have. There is, by the time you finish playing Pathfinder First, even when I was working at Paizo, I didn't realize this until I was forced to go back and look. It was just very well known that transmutation had like 3 times as many spells as everybody else.
Yeah.
I actually thought that transmutation always had 3 times as many spells as everyone else, but I was wrong. Because in the core rulebook of Pathfinder 1, it had like about the same number as everyone else. But it just turned out that when you asked freelancers, hey, each of you need to write 10 new spells, and then you do whatever you want, or some of them would have a few restrictions, but just be like, we want one that's like this for the art, and then 9 others of your choice. That just a lot of spells plausibly could be in about 2 or 3 different schools, but one of them was transmutation, and they would always pick that because, well, you're changing something, because you could rename anything. Like Fireball, I changed the temperature.
Yeah, because you have to fit it into one of those 8 schools. So you're like, I've got to make a choice. Transmutation.
So one of the things I did in Pathfinder 1, when I was there for the late stage of the cycle, was a pass of untransmutationing things that could have been in multiple schools, where I was like, oh, interesting. So 70% of our new spells are for transmutation, but I'll just change about half of them to not be for transmutation. And this was something that they were like roughly balancing how many of each there were, not exactly in core rulebook for Pathfinder 1. By the end, it was just transmutation had the most by a ton. I'm not saying it was the best specialization because some of the powers were really good in the other wizards, but that was something that was changed over the edition cycle and was clearly not an intentional, let's make transmutation better by giving it 3 times as many. So by having a set of curricula, and it's always going to be 2, you don't have this weird drift, and you can try to balance around what they really are instead of what they could become.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question that says, Helpful Drow asked Anto, isn't idea budgeted into the focus spells?
Yes, that's another thing that I really like about focus spells as a whole mechanical concept, is being able to, another thing to mechanically separate out and go, oh, we've got these really cool ideas that don't necessarily fit other places. Make them into focus spells. There's a lot about PF2's spellcasting specifically between focus spells, rituals, and all the other things that it's done that I really, really like.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into each one of the schools and give people a sense of what we're getting. So Ars Grammatica is basically about like words and runes and language. It has some abjuration, some divination, and a bunch of other things that said that they had runes in them that could be from like any school or even words. The school spells are Protective Wards, which was taken from abjuration with no changes, and Rune of Observation, which was Vigilant Eye from divination with no changes other than a name change. So what do you think about the theme and of Ars Grammatica and the spell selection?
So let's have a look in there. I've got it open here.
Let me see. I also didn't write down all of the spells. I just kind of gave a summary there, but it's got some interesting ones. The uncommon ones it has are Veil of Privacy, True Speech, Planar Seal, Detonate Magic, and Dispelling Globe, most of which are somewhat less disruptive than the uncommons we're going to find in the other ones, but it is quite a lot of uncommons, and your only choice at 9th is an uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the idea of there being a reasonable number of uncommon spells in a school devoted to kind of runes, specifically the rune element, because in my mind, runic magic is kind of older magic and kind of a niche of magic within the niche that is magic. So I don't hate the idea of there being more uncommon spells within that curriculum in of itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because a lot of the spell names have changed, I can't trust myself to remember what any of the spells are.
A fair number of them are the same. Veil of Privacy is Private Sanctum. True Speech is Tongues. Detonate Magic is Disjunction. Planar Seal is whatever that really similar one was, where you Dimensional Lock.
Have a look. I mean,
Dispelling Globe is Globe of Invulnerability. So
it's not the school that I would take of the list. It's not the most exciting one to me, but I think I could see making a wizard that is more into the kind of rune elements and going into, or even into kind of like ancient languages and going into that kind of, I'm going around trying to find all of like the long dead magics that kind of died with these ancient civilizations whose, you know, languages have gone away and their powers have gone away and their magics have gone away. And part of my journey is going to be going out and trying to find those places. That could be a cool kind of like thesis for that wizard, you know, for them to go and do their dissertation on.
And in Golarion, you could be looking up Thessalonian rune magic. Now, one extra benefit is it actually has 4 first level spells, where most of the curricula have 3. And also it's got some of those spells are Runic Body and Runic Weapon, which aka Magic Weapon and Mage Armor. So having those in there is a really good safety net, because it means if you're at a level where there's a heightened version of one of those spells and there's nothing else that you want, like you could always prepare one of those as your curriculum spell. So that's a useful one. And Protective Wards and Rune of Observation both have their uses, especially Rune of Observation. In some campaigns, being able to slap those down, and they last for a long time, and you can refresh them after having already refocused and potentially have up. I think your steady state is that you can probably have 6 of them active permanently if you don't want to have any other focus points and you never sleep. So presumably when you sleep, they're going to go away. But other than that, you could have about 6 of them up in different positions and just constantly being refocusing and keeping those 6 active. More realistically, you have fewer, and then you have some time to do something else. But
yeah, useful for, you know, if you're a dungeon delver and you want someone to kind of help you prep an area, if you're going for rests in risky situations, you want to help prep the area, make it a little bit safer, handy to have someone from the school of Ars Grammatica on the team.
100%. So battle magic, bunch of fighty spells. This is mainly evocation attacks and defenses from abjuration, but it also has true target from divination, which is also one of the best spells of like level 7. It's so strong. So this is going to be a lot of people's favorite because a lot of people like attacking. And
I feel like this will be the most picked basic school. Like of people that are going to choose from this list, battle magic will be the top pick, I think.
Yeah, it's not my school for wizard. If I was going to try to play a blasting character, I would play something else. Nowadays, probably an elemental avatar, but there's other choices too. But I think people are going to like it. And it has taken Force Bolt from evocation and energy absorption from abjuration as its focus spells. I think it has a pretty good mix of attacks and defenses that are useful and have a variety of different use case. It does also even have a mist, aka obscuring mist from conjuration. So a lot of good battlefield abilities.
Yeah, I think it hits all of the points that you'd want for a battle casting wizard, and you're not going to feel like you're missing out on any of the headline ones. If you're choosing a battle casting wizard, you want your fireballs, you want your chain lightnings, you want most of the spells that are present there. So it's a nice one to be like, here's a pre-packaged list of the spells that you were going to choose anyway. So we've done it for you.
I also appreciate that many of the levels, not all, by virtue of mixing in these utility, especially at the low levels, have something that is not going to be like, it's easy for a blasty character to just all be damage and then be like, but what do I even prepare in my 3rd level slot? But this has got Earthbind in there. It's got a Mist for 2nd level, which is good in late stage. At 1st level is maybe where you're not so sure, but 2nd and 3rd having Mist and Earthbind, I think really, really help.
Yeah. I mean, Mystic Armor is the new Mage Armor, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't think at high levels I want a 1st level Mystic Armor. It doesn't do anything.
No, but for the early levels.
Early levels is great. You breathe fire if you need it. Force Barrage, aka Magic Missile. Force Barrage is stellar when you first get it. Mystic Armor is great. I'm more looking into, I'm high level. What am I doing with my low level slots? And a less well chosen set of battle spells could have had a big problem where none of them were useful. But here I find the 2nd and 3rd level both give me something I like. 1st is the only one that I'm a little iffy on, but honestly, at level 15 or whatever, do I really need my 1st level school 1 to be doing a big deal for me? How important is that?
Yeah.
So next up is the School of the Boundary. It breaks boundaries too. It's got mostly planar stuff from conjuration and like necromancy. There's a little banishment and divination in there too, such as dispel banishment and unrelenting observation. The school spells that it picks up are Fortify Summoning, which is augment summoning with the OGL name shaved off. And that's unchanged. And Spiral of Horrors, which is a cooler name of Dread Aura from Enchantment, but also unchanged other than the name change. And so Battle Magic did not have uncommon spells. School of the Boundary has uncommon spells, and it has perhaps the uncommon spells that GMs would, other than maybe Resurrect, which is not in the Wizard, want to decide if they were going to give you the most and maybe not give you Teleport and Interplanar Teleport. So,
Teleport is a weird one because I don't think I've ever played in a game where my players haven't ended up with access to it. And it does definitely change the game dramatically. I'm glad that it's an uncommon spell purely to give the option to say, hey, look, I want you to experience, travel rather than just winking between points. But it's, again, I guess if it was something that you were really concerned with, you could institute your own. The School of Boundary is an uncommon school. It's not a deal breaker. It would have been nice to get some uncommon or rarity tags on the schools, but I don't know are there any that don't have uncommon?
There are School of Battle Magic. There aren't enough School of Battle Magic and Civic Engineering don't have any uncommon. Neither does Mentalism, but or Protean Form, I think. So
it might be that it'd be like, here's a bunch of schools. Half of them you can't use without your GM's permission. So they might have had that. Might have been the consideration when they were going through it. If we don't want to kind of semi-lock.
Civic has one. Civic has one uncommon. It has discern location, aka pinpoint now.
You can play my games, Anto. Is that everywhere? All my dungeons just have teleportation or anti-teleportation. What do you know? You can't go anywhere.
In my Pathfinder 1 game, I deployed so much forbiddance to keep from teleport shenanigans.
Yeah, so many APs have that in their final dungeon. It's just like,
you have
why do that when you can just make it uncommon and maybe not give it out? So there's a super chat on this topic from Helpful Drow that said, is it just readily viewed uncommon as more powerful than common at this point? This doesn't feel like the intent behind it originally. No, we're not talking about raw power here. We're talking about disruptive potential.
Yeah.
Those are different. Like, it's the potential to just throw things off. Like, one of the spells in here, Mentalism also has one uncommon, mind reading. So like all of them except Protean in battle have at least one uncommon, which is the issue. So like things like mind reading or that might disrupt your GM's plot because you read someone's mind, or like talking to the corpse on a murder mystery. So that one's uncommon. Or teleport in a travel campaign where it's like, we need to travel over here. Okay, we just cast teleport. Well, there were 4 AP volumes where you're supposed to travel. Yeah, but we just cast teleport. So then Jade Regent was a travel game. So they're like, well, you have an artifact, and that artifact has an anti-teleport. So the artifact, you could teleport if you want to leave the artifact behind that you need.
Yeah, teleport I feel like is the quintessential one.
We did that in Indigo Isle, I think, as well. We did lots of shenanigans.
Or Indigo Isles, they aren't high enough level for teleport, and it's uncommon, so we didn't have to do anything.
We didn't have to do it. We
were okay.
Teleport is a pain in the ass. I hate teleport.
It's
I like it when I like it.
It's the way I view a lot of uncommon spells. It's the spells that you kind of, as a GM, you always have to be hyper aware that anytime one of those spells comes out to play, it could radically change everything that you've planned and anything that you thought might happen for the next session or two.
Yeah.
If you go, right, I've spent several hours prepping this city that my players are in at the moment, and they're going to spend the next couple weeks in the city, and you get to game night and they go, we teleport halfway across the world. Okay, cool. Guess I throw out everything I've just prepped and scribble out all the names, and now this city's something completely different if they haven't interacted with it.
But isn't that if they have interacted with it for?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like with teleport, when I like it, and otherwise it can be very disruptive. And my best story about this, it is technically in a Mutants and Masterminds game, but I built a character who had so many alternate power sets, and she could switch between basically a bunch of magic items that gave her a different power set. One of them was a teleporting crystal that just warped around the battlefield close range. And I specifically intentionally did not put in the ability to teleport long distance, because I was like, if I can just go anywhere in the world, this is super disruptive and problematic. And so then the GM, the moment I came in, I had all these powers. The GM is like, okay, so I need us to go to Tokyo from where we are right now, which is like Washington, D.C. So maybe your teleporting diamond of Eris can go to Tokyo. I was like, all right, yeah, I guess, like, say I overloaded or something, but I intentionally didn't give myself that ability because I didn't want that. But that was an example of what I was saying, which is teleport is disruptive until it isn't, because sometimes the GM needs it as a plot device to get the story to start. And when that isn't the case, it's usually a huge problem. And then there's sometimes an in-between, but rarely.
It's one of those things, as soon as it becomes a factor, it is a factor in everything that you plan for. You're like, okay, they could just teleport. I no longer have to think about travel as a distinct section of the game, because they're probably not going to travel 4 days between point A and B. They'll just teleport.
Just do what my disruptive players would do. They would like do Earth Glide and start in the dungeon and then Earth Glide all the way to the end, and that was
That's
it.
why we took out like the Earth Glide stuff in PF2 so that your disruptive players would stop doing that, Steven.
Thank you. I was literally, I was running Pathfinder first edition society play, and I'm like, because you don't know who you're gonna get, and I'm like, great, thanks. You ruined the whole game for me and everyone. I'm like, okay.
My last campaign, the players would collectively turn to mist, and they'd call it fart mode, and they'd just fart across the land and just travel hundreds of miles
with Windwalk.
With Windwalk, and just like, okay, cool. So I built out this whole sandbox. You said you wanted to sandbox and explore travel, and you're just gonna fart walk across it.
Yeah, I had a group that did that in PF1. Now, fortunately, in PF1, there was you go really fast, but if you get into a combat or get hit, you have to slow down. And your defenses just don't exist and you can't do anything. So I was able to interrupt it because a bunch of giants started throwing rocks at them. And they were like, okay, now that we're in combat, that lowered our speed from 60 miles an hour to 30 feet per round. So our choices are to dismiss it on enough characters to beat these giants, which they was PF1, so that didn't have to be their whole party, but it still would be annoying, or to tank hits from the giants with our horrible AC when we're in the mist form for they calculated it out. And they're like, we'll probably get past them, but we'll get hit for 10 rounds. And they were like, we don't want to be hit for 10 rounds. So I did force them out of their Windwalk. And then they're like, okay, we cast another Windwalk because we had a scroll.
Well, if they're gonna go in fart mode, I would just have storms all the time. It's
but that's the benefit of the uncommon tag. It means that there isn't just a default assumption that you're going to get access to all of these spells, and that it's always I now have the ability to get this spell. It's an uncommon. Can I have it, or is there a way that we can get it? And it becomes more of a conversation, and it can be cool, let's work a way to get these spells in a way that I, as the GM, am prepared and anticipating, and you're not suddenly accessing 10 of these disruptive spells at once. I'm only having to account for one, maybe two at a time, versus whoosh, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's about disruption, not power. Paizo would never generally, although in some cases by accident would, because of a different reason, print a spell that was just this is Fireball, but it does 9d6 instead of 66 and it's uncommon. That's not how it works. It's not just going to be more powerful. It might be more disruptive. Now, there is a reason that you might find uncommon or rare spells that are too powerful that is not because of the design supposed to be that way, but because if you find a spell that was printed in the back of a Pathfinder comic or something like that, it's always going to be rare because it was in a Pathfinder comic to begin with. And then also chances are you didn't have as many people looking at the spell because it was in a Pathfinder comic, which also may have given it a chance that it would have a higher chance to be powerful, not intentionally because it was rare, but because it didn't have as many passes and maybe something was left in.
Yeah.
So that is not because rare and uncommon are supposed to be more powerful, but because they sometimes are accidentally more powerful.
I've never considered the uncommon and rare tag attaching to less kind of mainstream products as I don't know if it is an intended effect, but the idea that they might have less eyeballs on them. So adding a rarity tag being kind of a secondary buffer to prevent them being unbalanced is kind of genius. And I really like that.
I can tell you that was intentional because that is one of the reasons that I pitched for rarity. It was a small side reason, but because of the fact that there's not enough people at Paizo always to look at everything as much as you would want to. So the idea that the products that would have fewer eyeballs on them would also be rarer in case there's something disruptive in it was not an accident.
I thought that was always the intention. Is that it's basically
it was not an accident.
I didn't think it had to do with quote rarity. I think it had to do with
but in
power.
Pathfinder 1 there was no rarity. So if an adventure
2,
path was printed out with a bath matter or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was always for power. At least that's what I thought it was.
Well, it's not for power. It's for
not for
potential
power.
disruption.
Sorry. Not for power, for disruption. I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that it's power.
Yeah.
It's just that it gives the GM because everything that was always a problem in the game seemed to become uncommon suddenly. And I was like, aha, genius, because now I can veto. Well, because before you get into the arguments of, no, you have to allow that. It's in the game. It's in the rules. And now it's like, you're right, it's in the rules. Uncommon, I get to choose, and I choose not to. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for 90% of tables, if you're playing with people that you know well, it's a rational conversation where you're like, hey, look, this thing is slightly disruptive, and it's going to make my life slightly harder.
Well, I guess you haven't played with my players. No, I'm kidding.
Can we slow the brakes on this? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. But you've got to account for people that play society play, people that play open tables, and it gives so much more power to those GMs to say, hey, I just need a little leeway so that I don't pull my hair out when I'm trying to run.
And I had the guy who tried to earth glide, and then I'm like, oh, you can't earth glide. So the guy then took out his adamantium sword and started to cut holes through the walls and just go to the end of the dungeon. I'm like, and this is again all society. I'm like, all right, guys, come on, man. Like,
you win. You win. Go on to the next adventure.
You win Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it was advanced.
It was advanced. Right. Congratulations.
Okay. So we had 2 super chats. So Chandrai said, I wish that these new arcane schools gave a bonus like on a skill action, some kind of skill feat. For instance, Ars Grammatica on deciphering scripts or additional languages. I mean, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I like
the problem is not all of them may care about skills. Like the battle one might not as much. I think, Chandrai, I'm going to pitch this to you. It's too cool not to do something. So why not make a Pathfinder Infinite product that is a feat, but the way that the feat works is all existing schools have something on there. The feat is like called school training or some better name than that, but that's a very generic one. And it basically is like you learn the secrets of your school's additional techniques, and then it puts in several benefits, make like a first level feat or something like that, several benefits, one for each of the existing schools. And then like the idea is if new schools come out, then, the GM and players will work together to come up with the benefit for that. You could do it.
Too cool for school.
I like
you can use that. You got my permission. There you go.
You can use Too Cool for School.
That's a great name.
Nicholas Paradise says, I don't think anyone has a problem with the new theme. It is amazing. Mechanically, the new schools are a decrease in power and versatility. And Nicholas Paradise says they have boring feats still. So we'll look at the feats. Not that much of them have changed. So it's the fact that people thought that the feats were a little more boring. They may still think that.
They're still boring.
They may still think that. Some of the new feats that were added, I think, have a little have cool visuals and thematics, though. So we'll get into that. We still have a few more schools to go. So Civic Wizardry, I think, has some of the best curation of spells, even out of all of these schools, like curating and choosing them to try to get across the theme of this is a civic mage who would do things throughout in the city. It combines conjuration, transmutation, divination, and evocation, all in ways where it's like, oh yeah. But I first look at it and I'm like, what? And I'm like, wait, yeah, I see why a city would need this. The only one on the entire list that I don't think is actually useful for civic wizardry is Wall of Force, because it's not that useful because it's a short duration. And like maybe there's like a rock slide or something and you need to quickly put up a Wall of Force. So I can still come up with something, but all the other ones I'm like, oh yes, I exactly need these kind of things if I'm doing civic stuff. I might not have thought of it myself, but now that I see them, they're all helpful for that.
Yeah, I'm sure civic wizardry was one of the preview schools, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, that is really cool.
Yeah,
because it just fits the theme so well.
Yeah, it really shows what you can do. And the one uncommon spell in it is Pinpoint, which is like discern location. It also has 2 new focus spells, whereas basically all the other ones usually did not have that. Its 2 new focus spells are Earthworks, which is a variable action spell that creates a 5, 10, or 15-foot burst of difficult terrain, depending on how many actions you spent on it. Normally on the ground, but when it's heightened to 4th rank or higher, it can be in the air too. So that, especially the 1-action version to get a 5-foot burst in just the right place, can be situationally pretty clutch. And other like the 3-action for a 15-foot burst, like maybe I wouldn't use that as often, but there's sometimes when you might need it. The reaction, Community Restoration, is whenever you it's a reaction focus spell. So you spend your focus point, react when you cast a spell on a willing ally or more than one willing ally to instantly gain 2 temporary hit points per rank of the other spell. So community restoration's rank doesn't matter. And the ally or allies who have the spell on them can also gain 2 hit points per rank divided any way you choose among the allies. So if I cast it on Steven and Anto, and it was a 5th rank spell, or let's say 7th rank, I cast haste on Steven and Anto and myself. It's a full party haste. And so I gain 14 temporary hit points, and then I can choose to give Anto 14 temporary hit points and Steven 0 if I want. Or I give them both 7. I could do whatever I want with the temporary hit points.
How dare you?
So, that can be situationally useful. It's a reaction, so I always like that action economy.
Yeah, anything that increases the action economy is always a nice thing to have.
This is one of my favorites thematically for the curriculum. And the school spells are pretty good. Like, I don't think that they're like super busted or really like top level power, but you don't expect to get the top level power out of the School of Civic Wizardry, and it just really fits my image of like a civic mage.
Yeah.
Civic mage? What's a civic mage?
Like a mage who's going around like fixing up the town, is like hired by the government for infrastructure purposes. Like the idea that like in a fantasy setting, if you hire a few powerful mages, you can just overturn the entire idea of what it takes to like do infrastructure projects in your kingdom. I think is a cool world building thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So in Mark's world, he's like, we are not going to be slaying the dragon. Instead, we are going to be putting down a road in the middle of town. That is
basically, yeah.
Well, sort of.
More than sort of, I think, yes.
No, what I'm saying is that the kingdom is hiring a bunch of Scientific like mages because they do need people to put down the road more than play the dragon.
Yeah.
But my other half of this is that Paizo has very smartly curated the spells so that they are ones you would want for that, but are good for slaying the dragon. So you're the one who was like, nah, I don't want to build a road anymore. Let's use this to fight.
Or better yet, you are building the road, and then the dragon shows up, and you're like, quick, use all your civic duty magic
behind my wall of force.
Fight the dragon! see a new adventure in my...
It's your origin story, right?
Yeah.
All you wanted to do was build your road, but all the other civic mages got killed by a fire of dragon breath. You survived, and now you're out for revenge. And you're going to use all the things you use to like find trapped workers who were underneath a collapse, or like use an earthquake to terraform an area, and all those other things. Now you're using them for vengeance.
The funny thing is, I shouldn't be talking since I'm running my guys through Ages of Edgewatch, and they're basically police officers. So
there you go.
It's basically the same thing. Just they're civic servants, so civil servants. So I guess it's all the same.
There you go.
But I don't see a lot of adventuring. But whatever. In Mark's adventures, it's like we're gonna be changing the tax code using my accounting as an inventor, and like that's his adventures.
The gang rewrite the municipal tax code.
Yes,
that's not what the adventurers do. But I think that in the kingdoms they do have mages who are doing the infrastructure projects, and
I've long maintained that wizards are better served doing projects like that than going out and adventuring. You can make far more money as a wizard doing civic projects or casting spells in and around the town than you probably could out adventuring where you're likely to get eaten by a dragon.
Unless you're in Mark's campaign where both can happen.
Well, here we go. New character concept.
Oh God!
Your character didn't have enough money to pay for wizard school, and you wanted to go to the School of Battle Magic, but your parents told you You had to go to the school of civic wizardry because it was a more realistic option.
That's right. They're like,
How many people do you need to fight the dragons? But you always need more civic wizards.
Right.
And then afterwards, just you took their money, you got a degree in civic wizardry, and then afterwards you went to fight the dragons anyway, just to show them.
You're like,
They
what are you
just
gonna
long enough
major
to
in?
learn disintegrate, and then you're like, I'm out.
Right,
Yep.
what are you gonna learn? What are you gonna go to magic school for? It's like, I want to learn battle magic. It's like, you'll never use that. Instead, you're gonna be an accountant. You're gonna help.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
When are you gonna use
it's like,
battle
Dad,
magic?
I don't want to be a calculator. I don't want to just sit there doing numbers for geeks. It's like, I want to fight dragons. It's like, you'll never use that, and I'm not sending you to wizard college and paying for that.
Yep. And it'd be like, why are you trying to learn disintegrate? Well, it can destroy like a collapse in a building and get to someone who's there. Like, okay, you can learn disintegrate. It's like, nah, I'm gonna use it to disintegrate dragons.
Exactly.
Be like,
Exactly.
no, dude, dragons have good fortitude saves. Okay, use it to disintegrate Fae. It's like, okay, I'll use it to disintegrate Fae. We're good.
That's right. It's like one of the classes in wizard school can be so it's like spells that are useful in multiple situations, or utility spells, or are they, with a question mark. And it's like, oh, you're gonna learn how to like destroy a bridge and take down mountains with disintegrate, which could be used for anything else. You know what? It's like in Harry Potter. What is it? The defense of the dark arts, except for real. Like it actually worked as opposed to like
Yeah.
those roles.
Well, one of the only spells you could probably use in Pathfinder 2 and just kill someone, and that they're pretty much guaranteed to be dead, is probably Dispel Magic, or without it being an incapacitation. Sorry, I buried my lead there. It's Dispel Magic, because if they are underwater, like 10,000 feet down, and they can't breathe, but they have water breathing up, and you dispel that, they're not going to make it to the
You do
surface
not want to
before
play
they're dead.
Mark's games because he's like, oh, if you want to play my game, if you die, you die.
Yeah, you start out
So-
thinking, oh, we're just going to be civic servants, fixing up the town. 2 sessions later, I'm 10,000 feet deep, choking on all this water, and everything has gone wrong.
There you go. So let's move to the next school, Mentalism. It's got some divinations, it's got a lot of enchantments, it's got illusions, some of which are not even mental, but it's got like all the best mental illusions as well. It's very solid concept, and the school spells are Charming Push, which is they renamed Charming Words from enchantment, but it's saying that as a push is probably more descriptive of what it actually does.
Mhm.
And the Invisibility Cloak from Illusion. Very solid way to consolidate these, in my
Invisibility
opinion.
Cloak from Harry Potter. What? I'm kidding. Go.
It does have some issues with incapacitation spells in its curriculum. But I think there's always a choice of something else that you can take, whether that's Sure Strike at first level or what.
I like this one. If you were playing, I think that if you were going to play School of Mentalism, I feel like you might have played a different class. You might have played a more occult caster, because it feels like you're dipping into that occultism vibe. And I think if you're playing a character that wants that kind of vibe, in general, there's probably better options in terms of class, but in terms of how it delivers the kind of theme that it presents, I think the selection of spells is perfectly decent. I think the Charming Push rename for Charming Words works really well. It reminds me, like we were talking about Sanderson's work before in Mistborn, how they push on the emotions.
Right. Yeah, with the which one does the pushing? Is the copper?
Copper, I think.
Copper
I
and
can't
brass
remember.
or something
Yeah.
go in the two
Really?
directions.
You guys can remember. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, the one uncommon in here is mind reading. And based on what you just said on mentalism, Anto, I have a prediction of what you'll say about Protean Form as well, the next school. So unsurprisingly, the one called Protean Form has mainly transmutation. It does mix in a few abjuration, necromancy, and conjuration that arguably could be considered changing yourself as well. Their school spells are Scramble Body Initial, which is a brand new one that targets a foe within 30 feet. It sickens 1 on a fail, and it sickens 2 on a crit fail, plus slowed 1 while they're sickened, which is very nice. And then it just has shifting form from transmutation as its advanced spell flat out. So I'm guessing that you think, and let's see if I'm right, based on the way that mentalism, you're like, well, you're right. You could be an occult class instead. Do you think maybe you could be a druid instead if you were going to take protean form?
Yeah, kinda. It's another one of those where it feels like if what you want from the fantasy of the character that you're making is someone that kind of changes their form a lot, you might be better served doing that using the druid class. It depends on the kind of wider look of what your character is, but I feel like if your kind of central class thesis is I'm going to be doing a lot of changing of my form, druid is probably going to be a better choice.
Yeah. So people in the chat were like, what's so good about slowed 1 with sickened, slowed 1 as long as you're sickened with sickened 2, you could retch it away and then it would go away. And it's like, yes, but you're slowed, so you have fewer actions to retch. Yeah. So if you want to not be slowed, you might be able to stop being slowed after 1 round. But in order to do that, you have to spend all your actions on that round, and you have to succeed at all the saving throws that you take on that round. So best case scenario for you, assuming you want to get out of the slow, is that you lose your entire turn. And your best case on the other side is you just don't deal with it. You're slowed 1 forever until you're killed by the wizard who cast the spell on you, and you also have a -2 to everything forever. So those are both pretty unappetizing, which I think makes it a pretty nasty and therefore fun for me, the wizard, focus spell critical fail.
Anything that will impart multiple conditions at a time is, in general, just much better than it first appears on the surface, because conditions are just so good.
Yeah.
Like, my players have finally, after like 20-something weeks of playing, finally realized how powerful imparting conditions is, and have finally started to work together to put conditions on monsters. And we've gone from me being able to throw 1 or 2 level appropriate monsters and it be a real challenge for them, to just them wiping the floor with things because they're finally working together and putting the conditions on. It makes a huge difference.
Awesome. So Math Guy Dave checked, and I had the wrong side of brass when I said copper and brass for the mind-altering Mistborn. Is zinc and brass. The other metal that goes into brass. Yeah. So I was close, but not all the way there, because a lot of the 2 pairs in Mistborn are like an alloy or something, and one of the 2
it's the base metal and the alloy. Yeah,
but I got the wrong one. So the last school is Unified Magic Theory, which is basically exactly the Universalist, except for that it's a school now instead of being a non-school. Hand of the Apprentice is still here, and you now have to take it instead of getting a feat and being allowed to take it or not. It uses spellcasting attribute modifier, even though damaging spells usually don't, and I think it will keep that, even though I predicted that yesterday on the Witch, we found one of the focus spells that used the attribute modifier, and I predict it will lose it and will go to 2d10. I predict that this one will keep it because it previously did strength. It replaces strength modifier with the attribute modifier. So there is a stat modifier that would be in there anyway, and so I think it's going to keep it, but we'll see. I don't have inside knowledge. It's a complete guess. It also has a new focus spell, because at 8th level before, the Universalist could just try to poach initial spells out of other people's bag. Now has a new focus spell, Interdisciplinary Incantation, a reaction. This allows you, when you see an arcane spell being cast within 30 feet of you, you copy it, swapping one of your spells out spontaneously into that spell and casting it on your next turn. So then the creature you copied off of is temporarily immune for a day. I feel like that the Universalist was already solid in general, and Head of the Apprentice is good for some people. The fact that you now have to take it does mean maybe it's not right for you, but I think it's good enough. This one is a neat trick if your party has another arcane caster, because then once per day you can grab something that they prepared but you didn't. Otherwise, it's a little niche because you don't know when you're going to fight an enemy that's going to cast an arcane spell. Still, you can grab the focus point and just have it hanging around as a reaction, waiting for it. So it's not like you're hurt by having an extra focus point and the ability to use it when you need it. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like the stealing of the magic is evocative. Of all of the schools presented in Player Core, I think that Unified Magical Theory is the weakest for me in terms of it's kind of saying, oh, you eschew the idea of magic, that it can be neatly expressed. It's basically saying, oh, you're too cool for school, but you were also still have a school. It's a weird disconnect that my brain just doesn't gel with for Unified Magical Theory like the other ones. I think all of the other ones present a style of learning and then execute it really well, whereas this one is much looser and I don't think executes that kind of almost like dropout vibe nearly as well.
Yeah, I think it was destined to have some trouble because it means to carry so broad of a concept of like, this is the one that's NA. I didn't even do any of the other ones. So those are always a little bit blander in terms of their flavor. But I feel like the execution of it was good before compared to, I'm going to compare it to Pathfinder 1, 3rd edition, any other version of the game where you had specialty wizards and non-specialty wizards, 2nd edition, AD&D, all of those. They all had some serious issues where one or the other of them was like way better than the other choice. And it was like a mistake to go one side or the other. I feel like Pathfinder 2, even in the core rulebook, did, and maybe I'm biased because like this was like kind of a significant percent my solution to them, but did a good job of making them both good and people liked them both. And it still does that in the remaster, but not because the remaster changed anything, but because it keeps the same tech that made this an interesting choice before. It's slightly beneficial to the Universalist in that all the other ones got a little bit weaker and it didn't. But I still don't think a Universalist is like the must-pick option.
No, I don't think that... I've never been someone that would pick Universalist because I'm not predominantly interested in the power options. Everyone that I've played with where there's been any interest in power options in previous editions, both in PF1 and other editions of D&D where kind of universalist magic has appeared, tends to go universalist because there tends to be benefits to it. But like looking at this list, if I was going to choose one of them, I don't think Unified Magical Theory would be the one I would choose because it's got like, I think it's the weakest expression of the fantasy in terms of its mechanics because it has to do so much.
Oh, someone pointed out in chat, and they're right. I missed this. The Unified School still gives the first level feat, even though it doesn't need to give, like it used to give the first level feat. The only reason it did is all the other ones gave a first level focus spell. And then so it had its focus spell as an optional feat, and you could take it or take something else. You don't have a school, you decide. This one, you get Hand of the Apprentice and you get a first level feat for no adequately explored reason. So it's actually a significant power boost that I didn't catch. I still don't think it's a must take even then, but I don't understand why it kept the first level feat when it got Hand of the Apprentice for free.
Yeah, you gain a first level feat, you gain one first rank spell.
Yes.
And then Hand of the Apprentice. So, like, I mean, I can understand why you'd choose it to go, oh, I want the flexibility. I don't care about the other schools. I just want the mechanics of Wizard. But, yeah, I'm sure that depending on what else you've got in mind for your character, mechanically, there's probably a better casting class that would fit what you have in mind to execute mechanically.
That's fair. And I suppose you could claim that the extra feat that you're just getting, not even to buy Hand of the Apprentice, makes up for the fact somewhat that at level 1 and 2 in particular, you're worst at the Universalist, because Oh, great. You can use your bonded item once per day for each rank of spells you have. How many do you have? One. That's the same as everybody else at this point. You don't even have any advantage at that level. So it's probably like not a big deal. Like I said before, I still think you would be in your, like, all of these are viable options to me. I don't think any of them is like a must take. Not in the same way as Witch that we talked about yesterday. And then we tried to ignore the must take one so that we could compare the other ones to each other. So let's move on to the feats. People asking in chat is like, did they do the feats already, or are they just really still talking about the schools? We were talking about the schools because it's so interesting, and it's just a cool change, but a contentious one because of the power reasons too, but just a big change, one of the thematically biggest in any of the classes. So let's go into the feats. I will go through these.
Is too cool for school, or Mark is the cool school.
Where the school that you're talking about is wizard schools?
That's right.
All right, so the first feat change. Eschew materials is gone because there are no materials. So why not? Next, the Hand of the Apprentice feat is gone because now you have to take it. In fact, you get another feat, so you're just in good shape. Next change. Spellbook Prodigy now grants the magical shorthand skill feat, which actually did a bunch of the things that were in Spellbook Prodigy, so it kind of makes sense, plus a little bit more. It still has the ability to change a crit failure on learning a new spell into a failure, which was not in Spellbook in Magical Shorthand, so it's just a pure upgrade. In nice quality of life, and you don't have these two things that both do a very similar effect to each other. Yeah. So I like that for Spellbook Prodigy. I still probably wouldn't take Spellbook Prodigy that often, but if I did, I would. One of my players swore by Magical Shorthand, which has even gotten stronger in the remaster because he liked saving money and he wanted to have like 1 million spells in his spellbook. To be fair, it worked for him. So
Spellbook Prodigy is one of the ones, is the kind of spell I think that you take if you're building your wizard with the intention of, I am going to be the learned spellcaster, and part of my character is I'm going to Pokemon these spells and I'm going to learn them all. And for me, the joy of my character is going out and finding the spells and putting them in my book, and that is where I get my little dopamine hits for my character.
Very fair. Very good point. Second level, Conceal Spell. I didn't mention this in the I was remiss in mentioning this because we talked about it at length in our first stream with Nonat. So it makes them gain the subtle trait. It's nice that everything has been moved into a trait to make it easier to understand, but there is a problem that we mentioned in our first stream with Nonat, which is that the trait is incredibly under-specific about what it does. It just says now that they're not obvious incantations, and it mentions in the feat as well, your manifestations are barely noticeable, but they are noticeable. Enemies can use reactions against you for using them. They're just very, very subtle. But it probably should say in the subtle trait, and then you don't need to put it in the feat, which is great for future-proofing, what that means. It should probably say something like they need to make a perception against some kind of difficulty. Some kind of role. Yeah. It doesn't explain it. It's clear that it must exist because they're barely noticeable, so someone could notice them. It also violates the principles of PF2 to be like, no, second level wizard with this. Dragon level 25 can't possibly tell. Like, that's not how PF2 usually works. Usually somebody does get a roll. And even the flavor text of it says it's barely noticeable. So until then, I'm going to use the roles that were in the original version of the feat, but I'm just going to move those to the subtle trait. And I'm going to love the subtle trait existing because now one-stop shop for this role, and you can just plug it anywhere you need. All the spells that need to be subtle have it already. I like it.
The way that I have been interpreting Conceal Spell is taking the last line of it, the trait hides only the spell's spellcasting actions and manifestations and not its effects. So the observer might still see a ray streak out from you or see you vanish into thin air, to mean that in this example, it would hide. You no longer need to, I know there are no more components, but you would no longer need to speak the words to the spell. You no longer have your runic emanations. You just produce the effect of the spell.
So it definitely removes the runic emanations, and it specifically says that in subtle trait and conceal spell. But for your incantations and gestures, it says they're simplified and they're now barely noticeable. So they're not removed, but they are made simple and barely noticeable. You can just kind of hide them among your other stuff. So I would say that there's probably some check involved that may give someone a chance if they're training their eyes on you, but it's no longer obvious. It's no longer like shouting in the fireball in the middle of a crowd and watching people clear out.
It's definitely something that I think needs some clarification, because it does go against kind of the core of PF2, and it doesn't have the specificity that PF2 typically has, especially when it comes to something that would typically be assigned with checks and kind of perceptions or rolling on the part of the players to deceive or conceal. So I would like to see some kind of errata on that, or on the subtle trait,
or just an FAQ.
Yeah. But for the most part, I'm just pleased that Wizards don't need to take two distinct feats to get rid of both the verbal and the somatic components now of spells, and they can just take the one conceal spell feat and be like, cool, now my spells aren't as obvious.
Yeah, so that is another change that we're going to get to in 3 more, which is Silent Spell is gone. So we'll skip ahead. Silent Spell is gone. Conceal Spell covers most of it, since the incantations are now simplified and barely noticeable. It still has them, so I'm not sure that you can cast in a silence spell with Conceal Spell, because it says that they're barely noticeable, whereas you could before with Silent Spell, but that's a corner case. Most of the reason you wanted Silent Spell was so that the monsters in the next room wouldn't hear you yelling, I'm pre-buffing Stone Skin, while you were pre-buffing Stone Skin. And you definitely can do that already with Conceal Spell at this point with Subtle Trait. Presumably they wouldn't even get a check because they're not even like watching you, and it's barely noticeable. If they were in the same room with me, sure. In fact, they get a reaction with Reactive Strike when I do the minor things, because it doesn't remove those. So we'll get some clarification, but I like where it's going with this, and I like that Witch and Wizard have this, and it's something that they can do, because they're both casters that like think things through and are more likely to do things like this.
I'd be happy if they turned around and FAQ'd it and was like, if you have Conceal Spell, your spell casting goes unnoticed and creatures cannot perceive you casting a spell. I'd be fine with that. Sure, it means that there are instances where players will be able to use that to their great advantage, but so can the monsters and the NPCs. And
none of the monsters have Conceal Spell, so
not as written, but
Oh, sure. But I don't want to make it more like 5e where I have to go in and add Conceal Spell to all of the monsters and be like, well, now you can't counter me because they're uncounterable, because no one can notice them, and your counter spell can't trigger, and all of these other effects that I feel like it's a can of worms if you could just avoid all reactions on the spell because of the fact that, no Reactive Strike because it's concealed. And I think that would be a big mistake, and I don't think that's what they intended to do. I think that they made a really excellent change of putting it all in one place, but then didn't think about which pieces to put in each place. I think it was the right call to remove that text from Conceal Spell, but it should have been put or clarified into the subtle trait. And maybe they assumed that people would know if it was barely noticeable. That what would you do with default? With that probably perception to see if they notice. But I think it would have been worth saying it, because some people are going to think that means it's unnoticeable, even though it doesn't say that it's not unnoticeable, that it's barely noticeable.
I'd be inclined to think that the text for that probably exists, and it's just that it never made it into the document, because the assumption that people would assume seems to run against kind of the core design ethos for PF2 and kind of making sure there's clear communication of rules and intention.
Yeah, you're right about that. And there's a question in Super Chat about form retention. So we will, I will make sure that we mention it when we get to there, because I think it was not changed. So when we get past form retention, if I'm right and it was not changed, then we'll tell Nemo No Name that it was not changed. So next up, Bespell Weapon was changed to Bespell Strikes. It can now Bespell unarmed in addition to weapons. The damage is now only force, since schools don't exist. It used to change based on schools. So I like that you can do it on unarmed now. I think that's a good quality of life improvement.
Yeah, it's all good by me. Like, solid change.
Next, call bonded item was renamed to call wizardly tools. Now it calls your bonded item or your spell, but both the things you don't want to get stolen from you, you can bring back. Good quality of life change. Love it.
Yeah, the being able to kind of summon your spell book to you, making the change so that adds the spell book. I can't think of many instances where I've even considered deploying the move of removing a wizard's spell book, but if that happens to you as a wizard, that is among the worst thing that can happen. So having the option to be like, no, just get back here. This thing can never leave my side is very nice.
I've never taken a wizard's spell book unless everybody lost everything, essentially. Yeah. And even then, everybody got everything back pretty soon after, including the wizard's spell books. I don't think I've ever actually had it matter that a wizard lost their spell book in decades of running and playing the game, but theoretically, there are some people who really don't want the bad situation. I think Steven's player, John, who we keep talking about since the Rogue One, would probably take this because he'd be like, what if my spellbook got stolen? I'd be in big trouble.
No,
he likes
what
to...
he did?
What?
He played a wizard. You know what he did?
What did he do?
He tattoos his spells on his body.
Oh, I was going to guess that. Oh my gosh. I really like tattoo it on his hand.
Are you kidding? These guys are...
Okay. He'd be like, I saved the feat. I tattooed it on my hand, and I embedded my bonded item into my chest.
Who's the,
so it's just sticking out of there.
Who's the rune lord of greed? The
Karzug the Claimer.
No, who's the woman? The old woman. What's her name? Not greed.
Do you want envy? Bellamarus?
Yes, he got arrested.
Sorshen is lust.
It was the older woman. He got arrested and was thrown in prison. And while he was in prison, he got a tattoo of her on his back. And he does not fool around. Make sure it's
there. You go. So he has a wizard. He really did do something like that.
Did that. Close. He will make sure that. You know what? Tattooing spells. Small tangent. That comes up all the time. Thrown in prison.
Yeah, I've had it come up before as well.
It's very good.
There you
My
go.
point is, this is good because this actually comes up in long. If you play long enough, this will happen.
There you go.
So.
Someone in chat wondered what about the Rune Lord archetype. I know that Paizo had a blog about organized play where they were basically like, you could use pretty much anything that, even from the old books, if there's not a new version of it, update to the new version. Otherwise, just keep using the old one. But then the Rune Lord, they're like, well, it's that Rune Lord. Because it definitely is heavily based on the old schools of magic. So they were like, don't make new Rune Lords, play your existing Rune Lords or something like that. If I recall correctly, I'd have to look up that blog again to make sure that that was right. And then they were like, if you are a Rune Lord, all the old ones that have schools, you can use the schools that you need, but the new ones don't have them, and therefore they don't work for any school.
So by the way,
or it was something like that.
While we have a lot of people in chat.
We do. We could have enough that if they liked it, we would get 100 likes, and then Anto would have to do a character voice.
Anto will do his best character voice. I don't know what it'll be.
I don't know what it'll be.
I don't know what it'll be either. And then also, don't forget, of course, you get animated tokens. While we're looking at the animated tokens, I'm going to ask Anto a simple question. Are you wearing your Hellfire's Club shirt right now?
I am.
Yeah, of course you are.
It's a different one, though. I have two. This is my winter Hellfire t-shirt that's slightly thicker and warmer.
I can tell it. I don't even see it, but I know. Are you excited for Stranger Things 5, the finale?
I am.
Figured you would be. You're
looking forward to rewatching the whole thing again in preparation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll watch 4 before that because I haven't. I watched 1, 2, and 3.
I'm beyond Stranger Things fan, so it gets a lot of crap, but they are geniuses. So
that first season is so tight and so good. Any excuse to rewatch the first season alone, I'm here for it.
Well, even it's funny. I was talking, and then we'll go back to it because we always need people want to go in bathroom breaks and stuff. I was talking to my brother because now he's no longer on strike because the strike was he's in Hollywood, and I'm like, what have you been doing? He's like, I'm amazing. It's amazing how good I am at doing nothing. And he's been watching like endless movies, and I knew he was bored because every night he's like sending me texts like, "Oh, you should see this movie, see this movie." And then I was giving him movies to watch, and he's like, "I can't watch." He's a costume designer. He's like, "I can't watch that movie. The costumes are so bad." And I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "I can't do it. I can't do it."
Being too much of an expert in anything ruins it for you.
Yes.
It just does.
And when he watched Stranger Things, he's like me. He's like, "Oh my God." Whoever, it's like the person who did the costumes, they nailed it. Because everything they wear was either from most of them were literally 80s costumes. Like literally 80s costumes. I'll give you one more funny story. Mark, you might find this interesting. He did a movie that took place in the 70s. Okay. And he had to get, it was actually...
Didn't he have to get them to manufacture the material?
That's the same movie. You're right. He had to get them to get that fake, the nylon, but that's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
You're right. He had to do like the nylon, which they don't make anymore from the 70s, and he found the original manufacturer. He had to put in extras for football games. It was Remember the Titans is the movie he did.
Oh, yeah.
And it took place in the 70s, and I'm like, how the heck do you do that? He goes, well, remember that 70s show? And I go, yeah. He goes, I bought their wardrobe. The whole like the whole thing. And I was like, oh my God. He goes, that's how you do it.
That's a brilliant move.
Yeah,
that's a masterstroke.
It just ended. And I was like, how big was it? He goes, so they come in these racks, like those huge racks. He goes, I bought 63 racks of clothes, and they were so tight that you couldn't put a piece of paper between any two pieces of clothing. And he's like, that's how much clothes I bought. And he goes, and that's enough to give clothes for 1,000 or whatever, a couple hundred extras, the rest are CGI. But that's how you do it. It's like you got to get the actual clothes from the 70s. It's very hard. But anyhow, back to Stranger Things, and then back to Wizards. That show is freaking accurate in every way possible. It is fantastic. Back to
we're cursing back one level at a time.
Yes.
Are we now back to Wizards?
Yes. And did we get 100 likes?
No, not yet. Or at least I didn't see it going up. So maybe
likes.
mine is 83.
Come on.
That's around where we were before. So we'll see. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if we can get 100 and do a character voice with Anto. The next feat is a new feat. Spell Protection Array. It's one action, +1 status to save against magic in a 5-foot burst within 30 feet. It's an interesting use of one action at 4th level. Obviously, it's no raise holy symbol, because the raise holy symbol is like ridiculously powerful, +2 to you, and you can raise a shield at the same time. There are situations where this will help you out, but I feel like because it costs your one action, there's some stiff competition for that action.
Yeah, if you're in a situation where you know that there's saving throws that are going to need to be made, or if you're in a situation where you have to, it's the kind of thing where it's very niche, but when it comes up, it's the kind of thing that you're like, I am so glad that I chose this 10 levels ago and have never used it until now. But if it wasn't for this, we'd all be screwed.
I usually rather carry a scroll for that one time and then just take a different feat. But you're right. Next up, Explosive Arrival was mostly pilfered from the Summoner's Ostentatious Arrival. It's a free action when you summon something, deals some damage around it. It's almost exactly the same, with one key and head-scratching difference. The Summoner had future-proofing language that said that you need to do a 3-action summon spell to get this damage. This one just completely removed the requirement of a 3-action summon. It just says anything that's a summon. Since it's a free action meta magic, that means that if somewhere down the line somebody is like, I've got an idea for a spell, it's called Friendly Cat. Here's what it does. It's a cantrip. It's a free action. Summons a cat that can't attack or do anything other than be cute and just kind of give you a paw, and it rolls around. It's your pet and it's your buddy.
Yeah.
And if you use it again, the old cat gets removed and a new cat appears within range. And it's a free action because whatever, you just got this cantrip to spend a cantrip slot on having a friendly cat. That would allow you to do infinity damage. Because the damage is a free action and the summon would therefore be a free action as well. So it probably should have some limitations on when it can be used, or once per round or something.
Yeah, it is the kind of thing that it feels like someone has written it out and not considered the huge library of other material that needs to be referenced with every single thing that comes into one of these books.
But the weird thing is, I wrote the original summoner feat, and I did put in the limitation to 3 actions. So I feel like, yeah, maybe they were fitting for space, and they're like, well, all the summon spells that are in here are 3 actions, and we need to cut a line, so let's just remove that. It's just all the same now, maybe, but then they didn't think about the fact that later someone could create a spell that says that summon that is fewer actions because it summons something that's less important or that lasts for a smaller amount of time.
Something that I don't think people kind of outside of publishing appreciate is just how many decisions are predicated on page space, and how many times you might look at a thing and go, why was that done? It's to fit something on the page. And it's infuriating on both as a reader and as someone making, but it drives you mad when you're like, I've got to change this thing because it's got to fit on this page. It's maddening.
That's why we have a digital-only future coming. Space will never be an issue again. Speaking of which,
I like my print books.
Speaking of which, Mark, you like your print books so much. I finished the layout of Intelligent Weapons, and I have some copy fit for you.
You have tons of copy fit.
Yeah,
I know it. I was so close to finishing the 5e. I thought I was going to get to finish it, but I knew I was going to have to do copy fitting first.
I have good news though. It's only one thing you have to copy fit.
Oh wow. You're fantastic. Like I'm never used to having that small of an amount of copy fit until I worked with Steven, because there would always be more than that usually when I worked with any other layout person
too. On top of that,
that's excellent.
Because I'm insane,
and it's not because Steven like breaks things across spreads too. He finds a way to make it fit. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he works that magic.
Well, I've been doing layout for 36 years. So.
Fair enough. So.
I could rant about the layout on the player core specifically. I think that the layout is both better and worse than the original core rulebook across the entire book. There's plenty of instances where I think they've done a really good job in kind of expressing much friendlier layout, and then there are a load of layout choices where I'm like, there's so many like orphaned headlines and widowed sentences going on.
They orphan a lot, and I don't know why. I hate orphans. I get rid of them constantly. It's very common. I don't know why they do that.
When the rest of the book has been made much more streamlined and much more easy to read and much more kind of new reader friendly, especially on technical text, kind of orphaned headlines and widowed sentences that like those breaking, especially across spreads, really grinds my gears.
No, orphans and widow text I don't allow whenever possible. Every so often I do. And Mark loves to add lines by adding more paragraph returns. And then, of course, he gives me nothing but orphans and widows, and then I have to go in and add more text. So thanks, Mark. But anyhow,
there you go. Well, you know, Steven, you allow the reason I did that is because you allowed more of them than text.
You left out the more important part.
I would get it back from you, and it would have an orphan, and I'd be like, oh, Steven's okay with orphans, I guess. So that's okay. I still try to reduce them.
Whatever.
Yeah, I still try to reduce them if there's an easy way to do so, but I thought it was because you didn't care about them in the same way that some other people do. Because honestly, people who do layout are 90% of the people who care about orphans.
Yeah.
Unless it's a very short word. If it's like a long word, like many RPG words, I think that it's just something. I feel like copy fitting to the bottom of the page every time, avoiding orphans, and some of those other things are like a navel gazing exercise where everyone who's in publishing knows about it and cares about it when we read other people's books, but 90% of the readers don't.
Incorrect.
That's my personal thought.
Incorrect.
However, I will point something out, which is before yesterday's episode, Jess, Steven, and I all agreed that the fact that Steven kind of just accidentally gave the evolved form of an Eldamon instead of the battle form, because we've been sort of doing them in order, was irrelevant. No one would notice.
Someone
And that we definitely just put the next one next week. And someone sent me, they were like, I noticed we went from Eldamon number 67 last week to 69 this week. And I was shocked.
I know.
Because even I barely noticed that when I got the newsletter. And I was the one who asked for number 68 and got number 69. So this person had to be so paying attention that they were like, I got 69, but I'm sure enough that we didn't get 68. I'm going to look back and check to make sure I didn't get 68.
I did that on purpose to see if you were paying attention.
It makes me feel good that someone loves my newsletters and the Eldamon enough that they know that they missed that one. And we're going to definitely get it for you.
You're like, I feel like nobody is looking at this thing, and then as soon as the smallest thing goes wrong, that's when you discover, oh no, people were. They were definitely looking.
That is true, except there's one glaring mistake, which is quite large in the World of Battlezoo guide that, thank God, I noticed before it went to print. But I got to put out a new version because no one noticed it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh, good thing that you noticed it. I'm glad that you did. I don't even know what it is.
Too. I was like, oh,
all right,
terrible.
So I'm going to do 2 quick changes, and then we got over 100, so I have an idea for what Anto can read. So 2 quick changes. Spell Penetration was renamed to Irresistible Magic, which I like that name better. It just is the non-OGL name. Universal Versatility is gone because the Universal School now has its own actual advanced spell, so it doesn't need to steal spells from people. The next is that the feat Knowledge of is Power was added. So I'm thinking, Anto, why don't you read the entire feat Knowledge is Power in a character voice, so it's on point to the stream, just in whatever silly voice you wanna use for it.
What voice do we go with? We go with the terrible Benoit Blanc that I sent you.
Yeah, go with that one. That one was hilarious. That was what I was thinking about because of the fact that you sent it to me before, but then Steven was like, we missed the window and we couldn't put it in. I was like, no, Anto gave us a whole awesome thing. Yeah, but we missed the window, and you're right. We missed the window. We were too slow.
It's fine. Your academic knowledge about a creature allows you to subtly alter your magic to defeat them. When you critically succeed at a recall knowledge check about a creature, you can invoke your knowledge to make the creature take a -1 circumstance penalty to either AC and saves against the next attack you make against it, or the next spell you cast that needs to defend against. The creature takes the same penalty to its attack or DC the next time it attacks against you, or causes you to attempt to save against one of its effects. If you share this information with your allies, they gain the benefits as well. If not used, the bonus ends after 1 minute. And that's knowledge is power.
There you go. Well, it's like
knowledge is power.
A Brit doing a Southern accent.
I like it.
There you go.
Just someone Daniel Craig intended.
Yeah, someone wanted Deckard Cain, so it would be like, your academic knowledge about a creature allows you to subtly alter your magic to defeat them.
I don't know if that's close. It's like, oh wait, how do you do Deckard Cain? It's like, what's his name?
Because he's like, stay a while and listen.
That's it. It's like,
yes, that's what he is. Hello, my friend.
Well,
stay a while and listen.
No, that you have to use that to get into the tone. It's like, stay a while. I can't do Deckard Cain, but he's got a great voice. Anyhow,
he is a good character. So this is really cool because you're already smart with int. So when you're making these checks, you might crit, and then that gives them a -1 on their save or AC. Now it doesn't happen a lot. It depends on your game. If you're playing Hell's Rebels, which my group is, then there's tons of common foot soldiers and devils that were constantly critting recall knowledge, but some APs are like, look at our new monsters that are in the back matter and they're rare and their difficulty is really hard to identify because they're only in this AP, and that does get trickier. So weirdly, for a metagame reason of adventure paths having new monsters that are harder to identify, it can be harder in some games than in others. But if you fight common monsters a lot of the time, this is going to come up a decent amount, and it's a circumstance penalty, stacks with status.
Yeah, that's nice. Anything that you can do, again, anything that you can do to get status effects on your creatures and stack them up and be part of that party dynamic on a monster is going to go a long way. And especially with like you said, with the wizard, you're an intelligence-based character typically anyway, so you're going to be pretty good at this. It's not something that requires you to get in there and, physically fight, so you don't have to put yourself really in any danger for it. It's a pretty solid feat. It's a good use of your third action if you've got one hanging around. Recall knowledge and imparting some kind of penalty on the enemy. It's a solid choice.
Yeah, Nicholas Paradise suggested maybe giving it out to all wizards so that they all kind of do this in somewhere in the chassis. And if you want to do that in your home game, you could. If you think this is something that is the kind of thing any wizard would do just to give them more of an identity. Like, Wizards' identity was their big issue, and it has been because of the fact that they tried to devour every spell skull, and therefore they wound up getting indigestion and didn't have as much of their own identity. So I could see that if you want to do that in your game.
I'm a big fan of using feats as, not overwhelmingly, but sparingly, as kind of story rewards and as rewards to players anyway. And Knowledge is Power is a great one to give to a wizard as a reward, kind of being taught to them by kind of a mentor figure of, here, I'll show you how to exploit your enemy's weaknesses using the power of your mind.
Yeah, I like giving feats as story awards so much. I got a feats as story award system to be that I wrote to be accepted as the official subsystem for an AP. So in Strength of Thousands, the Academia subsystem, you do your academics and pass your tests, and you get a bunch of feats as you do that as part of the rewards for engaging with that. So I love it. I think it is a wonderful way to reward people that feels more special sometimes than just gold piece based rewards that you feel like you could have just gotten that with money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So next up, Scroll Savant was renamed Scroll Adept, probably because of autism, just like all of the savants that we've been talking about. Now that I looked at it very closely again, I'm 90-some% sure that this is why the scaling of this one, which goes from 2 scrolls to 3 at master proficiency to 4 at legendary proficiency in spells, is why the Witch One Cauldron we looked at yesterday, that's 1 potion, and then 2 at master and 3 at legendary, why it scales at master and legendary. But it still leaves me with a lot of questions of why take a 10th level feat and put it into a first level feat, because getting something at 10 that scales at level 15 and 19, I'd say, okay, that's like pretty equally spaced. Getting something at level 1 that scales at 15 and then 19 is very uneven.
You're waiting a long time.
It's super ridiculously powerful for a first level feat at those higher levels, especially. But then also, it's been a long time.
Powerful. You heard it here.
At those high levels, but you also had to wait for 14 levels where it was only doing a third of what it did at level 19, right?
Yes, super ridiculously powerful.
It is. To get that many potions off a first level feat, it is way more than it is basically more powerful than this 10th level feat that we're talking about right here, which is already one of Wizard's stronger feats. Because you get eventually 3 potions that are all top level, and this one gives 4 scrolls, but they are at progressively lower levels going down, and it's 9 levels higher, which is the main difference. If they were both the same level, I would say they're pretty comparable. Probably the potion one may still be stronger eventually. Anyway, this is still a really great feat. It didn't change at all, but it gave me more context to think a little bit more about Cauldron and why it's scaled at 15 and 19. Next one, Clever Counterspell. Big gains here, but also a loss. And the loss is not even any wording that changed. It's just the game changed around it. So its big gain was that you do not take a -2 penalty when you use Clever Counterspell. That's huge. The loss is that since schools don't exist, and they were one of the traits that could have been shared between your spell and other spells, it's much harder to share a trait with the enemy spell than it was before if they were like a weirdo spell that's not like an element or something.
Weirdo spell?
I find that because of the kind of extra hoops that Counterspell has in PF2 versus a lot of kind of D&D like systems, that a lot of my players just kind of ignore Counterspell now, and
it's so strong, Anto. But you said they also ignored buffs and debuffs, so it makes sense.
Yeah, for a long time they did, but because they can't just can't spell anything. And there are those initial restrictions. I think they see those initial restrictions and just immediately bounce off it as an idea, and then don't think to come back to it when it might be more appropriate for them. And it just, for example, our wizard,
I see what you mean,
read it and was like, that doesn't work how I'm used to it working in 5e. I can't just counterspell everything. I'm going to ignore that for now. And then has just ignored it for 6 levels at this point and probably won't go back to it without prompting.
They probably won't. What I found with Counterspell in PF2, having had players who extensively took it, in most fights you don't use it. Because you don't even always fight spellcasters. But when it comes up, it is highly likely to succeed. And if it does succeed, it turns what could have been a tough fight into a cakewalk.
Yeah.
It's very strong to use your reaction to make them lose usually a 2-action ability.
Yeah.
Now, it is true that not having schools anymore, it's not even any words in Clever Counterspell that change. It's just that the requirement of having a trait that it shares is rougher when there's some spells that literally don't have any traits.
No.
And I want to look at something actually, because I just realized something very silly. Obviously, this violates the rule of too good to be true if the wording is... Oh, no. Okay. They came up with it, which is previously there is a change in Clever Counterspell I missed, but it was covering for this problem, which is previously it said any trait other than the school, other than the tradition trait needs to be the same. They did add concentrate and manipulate to the things that can't be the same because they all gain concentrate and manipulate, because otherwise it would let you counter pretty much everything. They thought of that, they covered it. So there are some, like Alarm, the first spell in the game alphabetically, I think, or one of them. But the first one I turned to when I flipped to A had no traits other than concentrate and manipulate. So it can't be counterspelled by Clever Counterspell. So that is a nerf for Clever Counterspell, because before, no matter what spell it was, there always would be at least one trait you could use because it would be the school.
Yeah. I do really like the rider at the end of Clever Counterspell. The GM might allow you to use an opposing trait or something that logically might work, using Cold Water or the Water spell to counter Fireball. That is really evocative. I like that imagery. I like what that does. I like the way that makes the players think about the spells that are in their spell list beyond just, I counter spell, as just a matter of fact, and making them think about the narrative more. I really like that aspect of it.
Oh, thanks. When I wrote Clever Counterspell, I put that at the end. I didn't write that much for the wizard, but I wrote a few of the feats, and Clever Counterspell is one of them.
Like that whole element, because I think for a lot of people, certainly for myself, when I'm thinking about spellcasting, what I have in mind is epic wizard duels, things like Dumbledore and Voldemort's fight in the Ministry of Magic, and the way that they're trading off spells, and that evokes that kind of magical counterplay. Or the animated King Arthur Sword in the Stone movie, where Merlin and the Dragon Lady, the witch, are transforming into all the different things and kept throwing all the spells at each other. Can't remember the name of the film. Awesome scene of magic. That kind of stuff, that's what I want to see in the kind of mechanical expression of magic. So like that element of it, big fan.
Someone in chat was mentioning counterspelling heal. Yes. My players had a cleric with a multi-class wizard, or multi-class angelic sorcerer and counterspell. And that cleric counterspelled using their font the heals that I was trying to put up on my boss, because I had a boss that I was converting from PF1, and the original AP had this, and I put it into, which is when the HP goes down to a certain amount, 2 angels descend from heaven and appear and start healing it. So I converted that into the appropriate angel, and they have 7th level heal, or 7th rank now, which is pretty darn strong. 2 angels doing that would have gotten me back to full. And the cleric and the wizard, who also had counterspell and then multi-class cleric to get heal, or use some weird feats to get heal on his list, they both counterspelled the 2 heals. And then that was just it. And they killed that boss the next round after that. He was going to get a full health bar and fight him with the 2 angels, but that was just it.
In my 5e game, in our very last encounter with the BBEG, one of the players died. One of the others went to Revivify, counterspelled the Revivify. They hated it. They hated it so much. It was delicious.
Yeah, that's nasty. That's like yesterday's story where AOO killed the familiar that was doing a Breath of Life gloves on somebody's dead character, and they stayed dead because Breath of Life needs to be done on that next turn.
I want to clarify that I had warned the players that it was going to be an incredibly difficult fight and there'd be no punches being held. I didn't just
my players were
playing be like, you're dead.
My players were playing Mythic mode of a special interactive event at the highest difficulty level, and they were not Mythic. The enemies were. It was an organized play event, so that's just what happened there. Someone talked about the idea, Nicholas Paradise, of like skill feats that are class locked, and there aren't any right now because honestly they would take a lot of page space, and already you probably need more skill feats that aren't class locked. But that's a great Pathfinder Infinite product because it's too specific for Paizo to publish them because of how large space it would take. But you could do it. You could have a skill feat that has a prerequisite of a class. You could make a whole book where you have like 5 skill feats for each class or something like that.
I feel like skill feats are the one that every time we level up and my players have access to skill feats are the one where they spend the most time being like, I do not know what to take here. And they look at the massive list and are like, I'm overwhelmed by this huge list of feats and nothing jumps out at me.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next feat. The next feat is going to be Keen Magical Detection. So I found the addition of this feat a little bit odd. Only for one reason. So it's a 12th level feat. It's an interesting one. When you use Detect Magic Exploration Activity, roll initiative twice and take the better result as long as there's an enemy with a magic effect or magic item that's in the range of your Detect Magic at the time you roll initiative. So that's cool, and I like it because a lot of enemies at that level might have an effect and a magic item. But here's what's weird to me. They actually previewed this feat, and I thought that meant they were going to remove the feat Magic Sense, which is exactly the same level and is also based around detecting magic. But they didn't. No. And so now there are only 4 feats at 12th level, and 2 of them are about detecting magic in exploration mode. And it's very surprising to me because it's like, that's so similar, and that's half of your options.
And I think of the 2, I think I'd rather have Magic Sense. I'd rather just always know whether there's magic around versus it being having to use the Detect Magic activity.
I might rather roll initiative twice in the high advantage, but I do admit that's not mini-maxing. That's definitely trying to make my rich get richer things better.
Yeah. Just because if you've always got that Detect Magic aura on, you are just a bubble of constant detection. So if you walk and there is something there, you're just like, oh, I just know it's there.
We know John would take Magic Sense because he's always going against the worst case scenario where, and if I took Key Magical Detection, it would be greedy. It would be a greedy choice. I admit it, but it's weird that we have this conversation because there are 2 things that are so similar, one of which is greedy and one of which isn't. They do have different use cases. They are both interesting. You could get both if you take one as your 14th level feat, I guess, and just constantly be detecting magic and roll twice if they're within your range. I'm not sure it technically works as written because it technically says you have to use the exploration activity, but if my player wanted to take Magic Sense and Keen Magical Detection, I might work with them to allow them to have them combined because at that point, they really gave up a lot of their feats on this.
Yeah, you take both of those and then you also take the School of Mentalism and you're just like, I want to know all outcomes. Yeah, just floating around, being like, I know all things.
Yeah. So here's one that is also I was a little surprised by this, which is, so the Bonded Focus feat always was higher level than the other refocus feats for Wizard because Wizard wasn't as much into focus spells as like Sorcerer. It was at level 14. But the focus feats, as I mentioned every time, and I'm going to mention again, it now just refills your whole pool, but the very, very powerful effect of the 12 and 18 feats were just given to everybody at first level. And so it's pretty niche that you need to refill all of it in 10 minutes and you can't wait 30 when you can wait 10.
Yeah.
It can happen. And in those times, it's the exact thing that you need because you only have 10 and you want all of your things. But I figured that given the fact that it's already pretty niche for 12, whereas the old one was strong at 12 and strong at 18, obviously getting for free at first is even stronger than that. But I thought that it would be moved down from 14 to 12, given that it's already kind of was weakened, but it was kept at 14. Maybe that's for like reason of parity of keeping enough feats at that level, although level 12 got a new feat, so it could have gotten the bonded focus.
It is weird, like you say, anytime that if you've got 10 minutes, you've probably got 30 minutes, and I can't imagine many situations where you knowingly have 10 minutes but not knowingly have 30 minutes. That's such a specific scenario that it seems odd to take to build anything about your character around it.
I still might take it as like a second or fourth level feat just to protect myself in that situation, maybe. But for my 12th level feat, or in this case 14th, I'm looking for something that's going to help me more.
You want a lot more impact than that.
Yes. So new feat, secondary detonation array. Coolest name of a new feat.
Excellent name.
I like Knowledge's power too. It's very thematic as a name. It's a one-action spell ship. When you do an AoE damage spell, you punish your foe for not moving on the next turn because you make an obvious glyph that looks like it's about to explode that appears in a 5-foot burst somewhere within the AoE of your area damage spell. And just like it looks like, it explodes, dealing 1d6 damage per spell rank of the original spell that you put this on at the beginning of your next turn. So they either spend actions to get out of there, or you did like a pretty good amount of extra damage for one action, assuming that that there's multiple enemies in that burst and they won't refuse to move. So you're either doing action denial if they were already in the spot they wanted to be, or some extra damage. I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. If you're doing, it's great area control. If you're fighting in somewhere that has a choke point and you can put down an area of effect spell, which is already great choke point control. If you can put this 5-foot burst in the narrowest point of the choke, you just make it even better.
Yeah. And given that it's the same damage type as your spell or force, whichever, if your spell doesn't have a specified damage type for some reason, it's likely that you pick the damage type the enemy might have been weak to if they had a weakness. Yeah. And that means you're hitting their weakness twice because they're separate instances of the damage. And that can quickly become a lot better. It's already not bad to do 24 extra damage to the opponents if they refuse to move when you first get this feat, right? Like I'm never going to say no to 24. That's a significant portion of their hit points. But if they have a weakness, it's somewhere going to be between 9 and 17 at this level, right? So
and it's a basic save, right? So that if they critically fail it, it's the damage doubled.
It's doubled. The weakness won't be, but the damage is doubled. Yeah,
you could be doing tasty amounts of damage from this. You know, it's a really good area denial, area control feat to tack on to if you're already an area control caster. And
the enemy might know that their weakness is coming and they might move. And then that could be a big benefit too if you put it in the spot right where they were able to like do their melee attacks because there's a choke point. And it's like, well, then they have to back up away out of where they would want their position to be, and they lose actions on it too. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with this feat, and it's a 14th level feat, so it should be able to do some interesting things.
That's the kind of feat that you want at 14th level. You want if you're already an area caster, you want something that's going to make your area casting better. You want something that you go, this feels worth my 14th level feat.
Yes. So at 16th level, the wizard found the sorcerer in a dark alley, or maybe actually a bright alley because it's scintillating spell, which doesn't work for darkness. It mugged them, and now it too has scintillating spell, a feat that sorcerer used to have in the APG, but not wizard. So it's exactly the same feat, but wizard has it now. It can dazzle or blind on a critical failure as a made of magic / spell shape is the new name for that. On any effect that does not have darkness, because it has to be bright light and does not have a duration and requires a reflex save. And that's cool because most things that blind people are not on a reflex save.
Yep.
So you can blind things that are bad at reflex, like big, beefy monsters.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting to me personally, but it's definitely not useless at all. Like, it's got a wide application of spells that you can apply it to. It's an action, so you're going to be able to apply it to most of the spells that you're going to be casting. It imparts conditions on the monsters, which is always useful. It's targeting a save that isn't typically associated with those conditions, so it's just a nice one to have.
Yeah, I like it. I would take it. On my blaster, I would consider it instead of the detonation array, so that I would be able to give them a 20% mischance or worse if they get blinded as well. They're an interesting choice and a dilemma that you would choose if you were building that kind of character, because you'd have a bunch of reflex probably if you were a blaster.
Yeah.
So Spell Tinker no longer reduces the duration by half when you mess around with it and re-choose what the spell does. This means the GM may be forced to lean more heavily on the line that is already at the end that says that the GM will determine if this creates an effect more powerful than the original base spell and is the final arbiter, because it could potentially allow you to just constantly change what the effect is if it's something like the old spell immunity. I name exactly the spell that we're going into now. But it definitely makes it way more usable in some of the base use cases. And I find that it's just cool to be like, yeah, I know I had to pick which energy I was resisting, but I've decided to change because the enemy has changed what they're using.
Yeah, and it's also useful. You'd hope that by the time that you pick in 16th level feats that this isn't happening super frequently, but there will be times that you're going to come across a monster where you're going to use a type of spell or a type of damage, and that monster is immune and you didn't know that, and you have feel bad moments, and it's nice to be able to kind of undo that and be like, and get the option to change.
Yeah. And it's expensive in actions to do it in the middle of the fight, but you could, if you scout out, you could do it in advance. Like you had a pre-buff that for some reason, like you pre-buffed, it did extra fire damage, and then you look in the next room and it's like, oh, that monster actually gets hasted when it takes fire damage and is immune to it. We're changing that to cold. So
Exactly.
yeah, it feels like something the wizard is going to do. Like, that's not what the cleric does. They're not going to tinker with their god's blessing. That would be like sacrilege. They've got a beautiful spell that their god granted down to them. They're going to do it. But the wizard is just like, let me take this spell apart and see how I can tinker with it and change it into something else.
Pretty sure 500 years ago, a different wizard tried this spell, but they said 6 different words instead of this one, and they had a completely different result. So maybe if I try that, these guys will be cold instead of hot.
Yes. So last change, the feat formerly known as Second Chance Spell, which did not really tell you what it did, given that name does indicate you're going to get another chance on the spell, but did you know that it only works on enchantments in the original one? I mean, the name doesn't tell you that. It now has a more evocative and descriptive name of Second Thoughts. It now works for mental spells instead of enchantments, and it's a reaction instead of automatically working. But basically does the same thing, which is when the enemy critically succeeds, so your spell does literally nothing, you can recast it the next turn, and you don't you don't spend another slot. It just goes off the original slot.
Yeah.
And so that is a solid, it's a sort of a solid, like, don't feel too bad to your mentalist who just, the enemy keeps critically succeeding and they're like, my giant spell.
Yeah, it's if you are building your wizard to do mental based spells and to be all about the mind manipulation, it's building in some redundancy to be like, don't worry, you're not just gonna blow through your biggest spell every day and have no impact on the fight. You at least get second chance.
It is a really long time to wait, but it does answer your question before, which was, well, the School of Mentalism, what are they going to get that the occult classes don't give me? And the occult classes don't give you this.
Yeah.
Granted, you had to wait until level 18 to get that thing, but it is something that's just for you. I mean, and don't have to be in the school of mentalism to take it, but obviously, if you are in the school of mentalism, you're very incentivized to take the one that is not mental.
Pairing. It is unfortunate that it is so high. It makes sense because it is useful and powerful, but it is the kind of thing that I'm thinking in the course of your ideal campaign, the campaign that runs 1 to 20. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to get to utilize a huge amount.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's the same for all high-level feats. It's a thing that you've got to contend with for every feat at that level. They've all got to vie for how much they're going to get used at those levels.
Yep. So that's the last change to Wizard. That's what we got. So, Steven, Anto, what do we think about the Wizard overall with these changes? It's the one that has the strongest opinions raging online. I think it feels like, Anto, that you and I kind of agree with each other a decent amount. Maybe Steven has a different take on the overall for this.
Let Steven go first.
I missed that. Can you go through all that again?
What's your overall?
No, I meant the whole thing. I meant the whole stream.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, guys. I was checked out the whole time.
Did you answer a helpful Drowse super chat, by the way?
Which one?
When do you allow your party to have 10 minutes?
I answered the other ones, but I didn't see that one. When do you allow your party to have 10 minutes to rest after each fight? The attrition of time is important in PF2 and unclear. It depends on the situation. But there's not that many times that my players could rest 10 and not 30. There are sometimes they can't rest 10. I do that. I know there's some GMs who just let you rest 10 no matter what, even if it's just like you've stormed into the palace and you fought one group of royal guards and you're next to the room where the king is in the next room, and then you're like, all right, we're going to stop for 10 minutes. And they're like, yeah, okay, sure. No one comes. You're just cool. You go into the room with the king the next 10 minutes later, the king's like, what happened? You're in my room. So in my games, there are certainly times when they can't rest for 10 minutes, but usually if they can rest for 10, they can rest for 30 most of the time. That's sort of what is true for me. Steven, you're the eternal GM. You've never played a wizard in PF2, but you've GM'd enough times. How often do you give more time after each fight? And is it 10 minutes? Would it be 30 be okay if 10 was okay? How do you do that?
We have what's called in my games, we have the hand wave heal, we call it. So at low levels, I actually make them go through the healing process. But once they get, 5th, 6th, 7th level, they have so many ways to heal themselves, and they have a lot of things that reset after 10 minutes, that rather than me going through it, I basically look at it and do a rough calculation and say, okay, you will be fully healed in 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, somewhere between 30 to 60 minutes. And then we call that the hand wave heal. And then they'll say, do we have enough time to do a hand wave heal, which is shorthand, do we have at least 10 minutes? And I'll say, you think so? And usually and then they just do. And then I'll say, okay, 50 minutes have gone by, you're all healed up, everyone's recharged, your focus points, and then you're ready to go. Otherwise, I have had times where they're on the clock and they'll be like, do we have time? And I'll be like, well, I'll either just say no, or then when they go, if I don't say yes, they know that means no, and they better either move and go somewhere else, or barricade themselves in a room or something, so that's how I handle it. And I'm pretty generous, but also my players are smart enough to know that if they're in the hallway in a dungeon and there's wandering monsters or patrols, you're not going to do it there. Go find a closet or something to, sit in, and then they do their 10 minutes there. So it's never been an issue in my games, pretty much ever, how I think about it.
There you go.
And that's how I handle
What about you, Anto?
I can't think of a situation where my group has ever known they would have 10 minutes, but not known they would also have 30 minutes. Like the specificity between the two, that if you know that they might not know that they've got 10 or 30 minutes, or they might know they have 10 but not know what their upper limit is. But the knowing you've got 10 but not knowing whether you've also got 30, I can't think of a single situation where that's come up. I know times where they've been so pressed for time that they've had to use wish to take a long rest because they've just had no time to rest. So they've wished for the time for a period of rest.
That's a cool idea for a wish of just like
right at the end of our first PF1 campaign, they were like running up the stairs to the like final boss fight, and they were like, "We are tapped, and we need resources for this last fight." So they used their one last resource of wish to wish for a night's sleep, so they could go in recharged.
I don't think I would have given them that. I would definitely allow a wish for a 10-minute rest in PF2, but I don't think I would have given them a wish for a full recharge, because that's spending 1 9th level spell to get all of your spells back.
Oh, I was happy to do it. Because,
but you were going to give them a hard fight, right? You wanted them.
Yeah. It was still a hard fight, but typically when players use wish, you expect them to break the world. So if all they want is a night's rest, cool, awesome. You're not wishing for something that's going to blow the planet up.
That's fair. In PF1, there are not many things that are actually more powerful than getting all of your slots back instantly while all of your stuff is still active. But it is true that the planet is still alive, so that's a good point.
And they do have a penchant for blowing up the planet, like a reckless bunch.
That is a very well made point on that. So yeah, I would say I think that Wizard is clearly more flavorful with the curricula, but it is certainly over the course of the edition cycle, where more and more spells would have been added to every school. It clearly is a narrowing of the number of spells that you get to pick. It is. It just is. And it is true that some of the other classes, including Cleric, which was already very strong, got some large buffs in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the amount that Wizard has gone down is really that big. But so therefore, it's going to bring people back to wherever they stood on the Wizard before, which again, the general demographic, when you take like the larger number of people, not just the most vocal who hang out on message boards a lot, is that a lot of people consider Wizard to be near the top, and then a minority consider them like all the way at the bottom, and then nobody has an in-between opinion. So if you already consider them to be all the way at the bottom, I think you're not going to be happy with this, because you already considered them to be already at the bottom, and they got a few new cool things. They did get us a minor debuff with the school options there, especially in the breadth of what your choices are, and perhaps particularly if you don't like the set of spells for any of these, but you did like one of the previous schools, maybe you should work with your GM to create a school curriculum that's right for you in that case, perhaps. That does put work on you that previously didn't exist, though. And if you already thought Wizards were like somewhere around the top, then they still are, and they got some cool new stuff and got a slight weakening and like narrowing the number of spells they can take with their schools.
Yeah. I think for me, this change to the Wizard isn't going to change hearts and minds about how you felt about the Wizard previously. But what I'm most excited about is how it changes the design space for the Wizard, and how shedding the baggage of spell schools as they stood previously and some of the other elements opens up the opportunity to, and some of the other changes in the system as a whole, opens up the opportunity to do really interesting things with the Wizard going forward. Like, I wish Secrets of Magic was a book that was coming out next year or in 18 months' time and could introduce a whole bunch of new features for Wizards with all of these changes in mind. Like, the next big Wizard release, I'm really excited about. I'm less excited necessarily about the Wizard as it stands now, but I'm really interested about what they'll do for the future.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Not only did it open the design space wide up for the Wizard, but it has a very positive effect on the design space of all spellcasting for the system, because the Wizard is no longer like beating up other people and taking their lunch money anymore. You don't have the situation where the arcane list just says, well, excuse me, but I have to be good at all 8 of the schools because otherwise my specialist wizard isn't. And you can have divisions of magic that just like, oh yeah, Divine's just better at this. I mean, it did have healing. So that was the one thing. Wizard was just like, I can't heal. But other than that, I am the green-eyed monster who demands all other spells be funneled onto the arcane list. And now you could just be like, no, you know what? This is just on occult. That's fine. Arcane doesn't need to have it. Because sure, it's a mentalist spell, but the mentalist school already exists, and we gave it enough spells for it to have a curriculum. It doesn't need to have all of them. It can just it can bug out with these, and similarly for Divine and Primal. So I think it's not only good for Wizard, but good for everyone thematically and in design space. That the Wizard is no longer crowding everybody out.
Yeah.
As a Wizard fan, as someone who Wizard is my favorite class, it's still true as a designer that this is something that those who like Anto just really look deeply into what the implications are. We're going to see this. It's still true that it could be sad for someone who enjoyed one of those schools, liked casting all the spells throughout the school, to be restricted down to 2. I can see that. And I'm definitely not saying that anyone who is unhappy about the restriction shouldn't be unhappy, or that they should think that it has to be good for everyone, because it is a significant restriction too. But I like it, and I'm excited.
Getting your toys taken away is never fun. So if you were in the position where you're like, oh, I was enjoying the previous design space and I was benefiting from it, and you've got the new Wizard that's different and would be a negative change, just stick with the Wizard that you're currently playing, and chances are you probably won't play a Wizard in your next campaign, so it will be fine. Just stick with the Wizard that you're currently playing.
Yeah. And if you are in love with a new remaster spell that has no school, work with your GM to figure out what school it's in. Usually it's not that hard. Just remember from my own lesson that everything sounds like it could be in transmutation, so be careful about where you're going to add it.
Just start with it in transmutation and then justify its existence in somewhere else.
But like sometimes when it's not transmutation, like when it's like an illusion or an enchantment, it's usually like really clear. It'd be like, oh wow, this is mind control. It's probably an enchantment. Oh, it made it an illusion. It's an illusion.
You didn't.
It's like death or healing or something. It's probably necromancy. Yeah. So like, it's not too hard to figure it out. And if you, your GM, and your group can agree, then you should be able to just use all the new spells with your old Wizard and be like, my school was the school of enchantment. It was called. What did it have for a curriculum? It had a very expanded curriculum. It had a bunch of mind control spells. One might call them enchantment spells. And you can just even use the new paradigm, but create a, quote, overpowered, because it has more things on its list, curriculum that just has all the enchantment spells on it. Like, you could do that if your group is okay with it. So there's lots of options.
You never
that's the thing
what
for
I
me.
thought of the Wizard.
Yeah, what did you? We asked you, Stephen. We asked you to say it first, and then you said you didn't know what happened with the Wizard, and you asked us to redo the entire stream.
If you did the super chat.
You were being a silly goose, and this is what happens.
I wasn't being silly. I was making sure you got the super chat.
We did miss that one, and we did it now. So
I wasn't being
that was good. That was good. So what did you think, Stephen? What's your final word? Because I think...
No, I'm kidding.
There we go.
After going through every single
Stephen
class,
always has an opinion.
After going through every single class, I have seen the pattern, which is no surprise, is that the Wizard, the Witch, the Cleric, they had by far the most changes, and basically anything with magic had a lot of changes, and
Druid and Bard didn't.
And anything with Martial pretty much stayed the same, and there you go. So, I guess they just had, because they, like anything, it had touched the OGL so much that they had to, once they started pulling those threads, they had all these other threads fall out, and they had to really change a lot. So anything that is a spellcaster just had a lot change to them.
I think that the Wizard, they had to change. And my impression is that the Wizard would have been like the Bard and the Druid if it weren't for the OGL. They had to change it for the OGL. Whereas the Cleric and the Witch, they definitely did not have to change it for the OGL, but they decided that they wanted to. Either because of a large number of like popular opinion on the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And for cleric, I'm not entirely sure why. Although some of the things that were changed were things that popular opinion was negative on. Some of them were things that were already strong that got some buffs on the cleric. But for the witch, it was because I think they wanted to make a class that was seen as one of the weakest spellcasters stronger. And the wizard, it was more of a, well, we kind of want to keep it where it is, like bard and druid, but we have to change it completely in a certain way because of the OGL.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guess. I don't have inside information. Nobody comes to me and says, Mark, this is why we made each of these changes, unless it's in a blog
help us
somewhere.
fix our problems. They come to him like, help us fix this.
Oh, they
Then
do.
nobody does that.
They would, but I would say no. Yes, other people come to him, aka me. Come fix our intelligent weapons so you can be Excalibur in your next game. Literally, it's gonna be weird. I want to see. I see people playing with dragons. I got to see people playing with like all
Someone keeps saying in chat that the Monster Core cover art is out with the dragon in the background behind the troll and the fungus slushies running away.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I thought I've seen it before too.
Well, I know I've seen it, 100%. Let's see. I don't know if it was out or not. Is the back cover out though? That's what I'm curious about.
But maybe I haven't seen it before. Maybe it's just because the troll looks similar to trolls that I've seen before that I've convinced myself that I've seen it.
I did see this. Yeah, the cover. I saw that posted like on Facebook or something.
Yeah, that might be where they saw it too.
Yeah, it's actually
chat.
quite funny because it's like you have all the munchkins, the
little fungus slushies
the
or
fungus
whatever.
slushies running. And then the troll is chasing them, but then the dragon is chasing them. So it's like, are they running away from the dragon or are they running away from the troll? All I know is there's a lot of running in this. That's a very good cover. That's the type of cover
I like it. It's got a lot of movement and you can.
It's got a lot of
you can
movement.
see a whole scene.
It has 3 layers of parallax, which I always like. Actually, it's 4 if you include the volcano in the background. So. Yeah, that's a very, very covers are freaking hard, man.
They are.
Somebody has to make them all the time. And they're freaking hard to lay out because it's like, okay, I need all this, but leave the total top free and the bottom free. So you just got this little area to work with, and they're like, and go, and they're like, You
need to leave this part blank, but not too blank.
Right, and they're just like, And it's like, and then the worst is this is what always kills them. I'm like, oh, and then you need an inch of bleed around the side that no one's gonna see ever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, no one will ever see it, but you need it. Paizo doesn't do bleed. They cheat, by the way. They just they just have it go to the edge and then they double it and add an inch of bleed around theirs, and it's the same image. They just add it. Make it bigger, so they cheat their bleeds, which I think I'm doing, but I never do because I was like, no, can't do.
Because then you're like, if it is offset a little bit and you see part of the devil, ugh.
Well, because it's a hard line. When it's wrapped, you don't see it, but when the cover's wrapped, but when you see it on, you can see it occasionally. Like if you look in your book, you can tell. I don't know. This is like me being a printer and being a layout.
There you go.
I'm insane. So like I can tell right away. I was like, oh, I see it, and whatever. As that, no one. We were saying how people don't notice design stuff like orphans and widows, but this no one notices. I bet you no one actually will notice. Just me.
I was talking to someone the other day about the process of putting products through print, and I was saying pretty much every book that's ever been put through print has errors in it, and most people will never find them except the person that makes the book, because the day that it turns up, you'll find the error that multiple eyes went over multiple times and no one found it. And then you'll open it and you'll land on it.
No, you're right. We got pretty close to Jill Indigo Isle Pathfinder version, not 5e. 5e unfortunately has a few more errors in it just because we didn't go through it nearly as frequently. And
well, the way we did it though is that we still didn't find it at first, but because we put out the PDFs before we forced the print run to start, there was
Thousands of
time
errors.
where other people would read it
Yes.
and tell us if they found it. And I find that a great way to. I've never worked for a company before that puts the PDF out as soon as it's done and doesn't wait for the print book to come out. And this has been huge in having people find typos and other things that then the first run doesn't have nearly as many mistakes as the first run would have if the PDF comes out on the same day as the print. Because I like having a first edition, but I also like not having mistakes. And so this is like the ideal combination.
Yeah. I mean, there is like there's one thing that's missing, but it's at the very end, which makes sense because the stuff at the beginning for an adventure always gets caught, and the stuff at the end sometimes doesn't because people don't even try it out or they don't get that far. And then the other thing that was a mistake was on a map, which makes sense because the layout of the map was different in it changed, and that was actually my fault because I turned off a layer and forgot to turn it back on.
That explains it.
I've done that before. Classic.
Oh no.
That's a bad. Well, it was basically a room wasn't labeled. It's like C13. They're like, "Where's that?" I'm like, "But people know where it is." Because it's like the hallway.
It's the one that's not labeled.
No, it's literally like the hallway between C12 and C14 is, and I'm like, "There's literally a hallway." I'm like, "Where is it?" I'm like, "I think you know where it is. There's only one hallway between these two rooms." I think you'll figure it out. So I don't feel quite so bad, but it is a little annoying. Because I literally went to the file. I'm like, oh, it was there all along because I remember doing it. It was just the layer was turned off. Arrgh! Impossible to ever print something without an error. Ever.
Yeah. The very first like big publication I ever did layout for was like a food catalog, and the day they turned up, dozens of people had put their eyes on this, managing directors, loads of people in the company. Very first day it turned up, the first page I opened up, 2 images of the same product right next to each other when they should have been different. Massive images as well, like 1/6 of the page. I'm like, how did none of us notice this? Like 24 people have put their eyes on this.
Oh yeah, you always have that. I told you, I worked at a software company. We released a piece of software, and we were testing it on our computers for months and months and months, and went through testing and all this. And then it turned out that if you tried to shut down your computer, it crashed. And none of us ever found it because we never turn off our computers.
Yeah. Oh, God.
So it's like, who turns off their computer? It's like, doesn't matter. That's why I always say users are the best testers. That's why I put out the PDFs and let everyone see it, because then they find the errors and then we fix it in post.
There you go. Well, fix it in post. That's the refrain.
That's literally the refrain. So, all right. I'm tired. This is a long one.
I am too. Well, don't worry, Steven, because Rules Lawyer just told me he can only go 2 hours tomorrow, so we won't have to go past 5.
I don't even know if we have 2 hours worth of stuff for GMs. Cool.
We'll see. There's a lot of things in it, but because of the fact that it's so long, I literally don't have enough time to be as nitty gritty as we've been in these shorter ones. So ironically, I think it'll be less time because of that reason.
No, tomorrow we'll have GM Core. And then,
And I'll be free. I'll finally be free.
And we would have Anto on more frequently, but you play your games on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
move your game.
No, you can't do that. You can't make him move his game.
I know. I'm kidding. How about this? Whenever you don't have a game, I'm amazed your game's never canceled. I was like, our games are canceled all the time. So it's like, he's like, you have the most successfully, game of all time because you're always
pretty much. The only time we don't play is when I can't play. I'm very litigious when it comes to play. I'm like, we're playing.
Wow.
You're litigious, so you sue them if they don't come. That explains it.
Threats.
No, but I'm just saying it is interesting.
Oh my goodness!
Because so many games I play, sometimes you miss, or people are sick, or like this stuff, and it's hard to always make it. But I'm like, it's been a year, and he's like, I'm busy. I'm like, how are you busy? Every week?
we've been going now for like 6 years, and we very rarely miss a week.
Damn.
Well, Steven, you can't make him move something that's successful.
No, I'm not going. That was a joke.
A disaster.
That was a joke.
You'll be the Jenga piece that just topples.
No, I would not have him move it. I'm kidding. But I would. But I do say, if you are free, let us know. If you're like,
we love having you on.
It's always
the show,
a pleasure.
But we know that it's It's an overlap.
It's an overlap. Well, we moved to Wednesdays instead. Well, Tuesdays was too hard because it was like the beginning of the week, so then we moved to Wednesdays, and
Yeah.
Tuesdays are a little tough too. So Wednesday seems to be
Every day is tough in its own unique way.
Well, some days are tougher than others. In fact, you want to move this to Monday, Mark?
No, that's
Well,
the
there
worst.
you go. You see, you're like every day. I'm like, no, they're not.
I didn't say they were equally tough. I said they're all tough in their own ways. But Monday is the worst.
Yeah, exactly. We're not doing. It's like Monday would be really, really, really bad. So we're not doing Mondays.
I mean, I guess I could do it, and my thought would just be, don't expect myself to get much done on the Monday, other than just getting back into the things, reading everything that happened over the weekend, and doing the stream. But I kind of need to be able to do some things on Monday usually. So
that's why you can't do a Monday. Oh, you got a super chat.
Yeah, Henry F says, "Come on, Mark, you have to rank all the new spells." But that's not in the GM course, so I don't have to worry about. Oh, actually, I will, Henry F. I'll do it right now. I'm going to rank all the new spells that are in the GM core, starting with. He
meant in this one.
I know, but I think he was talking about
spells. Are there
not
really?
It would take a long time.
No, how many new
spells? I don't even know. There's a lot of spells. Most of them were renamed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, are there really that many new spells? Because aren't most like they're either renamed?
I don't think there's a huge number of brand new spells.
That's what I'm saying. It actually won't
I'm sure
take that
Foundry
long.
has like a list of the changes, and I don't think the spell list was that long.
It also depends on if you decide that it's new or not, and what makes you decide it's new.
Oh,
here's an example.
If it's brand new and never existed,
okay, but Steven,
in any way, shape, or form.
That sounds like it is an easy thing to decide, but I'm gonna give you one. So obviously, if it's like you just change the name, it's exactly the same. It's the same spell. What about Tailwind? It's the same thing as Longstrider, but it does it with wind and it has the air trait.
Nope, that's not.
That's the same spell. Okay. What about Thunderstrike? It's like Shocking Grasp, except for it doesn't have an attack roll. It actually is a saving throw now, and it has different conditions that it does on them, and the damage scaling is different, and it does some sonic damage too. But it is a first level electricity damage spell. And there is no Shocking Grasp equivalent. The closest to it is that.
Well, then that would be
closest to
that
it
would
is
be
that,
new with caveats.
Yeah, okay. I thought I would also say new with caveats as well. And so that was, I figured that depending on where you draw the line, some people might say Tailwind is different because now it's with air. I think it's still the same spell. I think it's still too close. But I think Thunderstrike is new with caveats.
That's new with caveats. And then there's
I
new,
think
which
that
is
they're
like
very,
brand new. Like
there are very few that are past new with caveats.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I would say.
It won't take that long. So there's not that many new spells. Sorry.
The Foundry list of new spells, I'm sure, is only like a dozen. Most of them are either renamed or...
Well, I can ask Ian because he's literally implementing them. He's the guy who does all of our Foundry modules.
Which of the Ians is literally implementing them? Or both?
No, it's...
only one Ian.
It's only... Who's it? Tikal?
There can be only one.
No, there's two. Actually,
is it? Yeah, no, there are. But is it Tikal or Spartan? Because those are the two Ians, right?
It's Tikal. Tikal's
okay.
It. Spartan's doing
Tikal.
I
think it's AEL. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
I only see it online.
Tikal is doing the. Yeah, Tikal's doing the remaster.
Okay, so there you go.
We could ask.
I'm sure he knows off the top of his head, but he probably is awake at night trying to get to sleep, and the number of remastered spells that need to be changed just flit past his consciousness.
But I can have him on. He'd probably do them. Henry now did another super chat asking, okay, take it back. Just rank all the spells. We have to see how they compare to each other.
Rank all the spells. Okay. I think we're going to... I
have it on
I'm going to direct you to friend of the show, Derek Melenda. I don't have the same opinions as him. I don't agree with him on how to rank the spells as the methodology necessarily, but it is a ranking of the spells that someone has done, and he's spent the entire year to do that, and I don't think we can. I think we have too many products to do that.
Don't worry, we're going to rank it. Come back on April 31st. 2024. We will do the ranking then.
There you go.
Perfect. I'm gonna rank all the spells.
Yes.
from 0 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's your
All right.
ranking system.
Mm-hmm.
So wow, we stayed pretty much on topic to the remaster for most of the time, everybody.
That's right.
I'm shocked.
Uh-huh.
It's not like us. Anto is just keeping us. He's so litigious that he keeps us in line.
Well, I've just also I realized this was. I don't want to distract too much and go off topic too frequently because otherwise we would never gotten through it. But I do have to throw in my little stories every so often because that's why the people come. They
There you
come
go.
here to hear Mark's voice and my stories. Yesterday, man, the comments were like, "Oh my God, Mark and Jess, they should just do this themselves." And I'm like, "All right, I guess I don't need to be here anymore."
Even I feel like
I'm hurt.
Steven, I feel like from watching some of our shows that we have subcategories of viewers because there's some who on some of the episodes, especially very business oriented ones that are just like, I don't even want to hear from Mark and the guests. Why do they even talk? I just want everything from Steven. And it's not only about the business things in those episodes. There's just including Steven's digressions into movies and things like that. That's what I'm here for. And there's a different subset of fans more likely to show up in episodes like these for PF2 previews who are just like, show me Mark and Jess, and I'm not sure what's what Steven is adding to it. And you know what, Steven, you optimized for them with the way that you've been doing some of these more recent streams by focusing on the guest and me. So I think that we're responding to the fact that there's some divergent opinions in the community about everybody who's on here. And I like that this is a show that has many different viewpoints and that we can engage each other respectfully, even when it's like Derek and I don't agree on the Ranger in some fundamental ways, but we understand why we don't agree. And we were both, I think, very respectful about those points when we talked about Ranger in that episode.
Yeah. Well, also
I heard there's a gentleman's agreement for pistols at dawn, actually.
Hey man, you don't want that. I'm a marksman. Like I go skeet shooting all the time. Anyhow, I also didn't realize it's like when you have 3 people on the show and you're going through something like the classes, 3's a crowd, baby. It's hard to get there. 2 is enough. You don't need 3 people like giving their comments on how a feat works or something. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine with sitting back when we do this. And then I'm more interested in the business. You know me. That's like when we're talking at night, I'm working on like deals and business and co-brands and talking to other.
Steven's doing 5-dimensional chess with like super agile moves, and it's always fun.
Well, I'm doing because I'm doing the business side, and I mean I still
Wheeling
do
and dealing.
No, I still do the design, but that's 95% more.
The art design work.
Oh, I do all that. No, I'm talking about even game design. That's
game design. Yeah,
that's
Steven does game design.
Mark. That's 98% mark. I will just come in and do edge cases and poke
Your
holes.
2% is usually really important.
I only put in like a small amount because also I trust you and the team because we have a whole playtest team. So they poke so many holes in the stuff that
they find everything.
I don't need to worry about it. I don't really need to worry about it. So I take care of my stuff. But that's how you run a successful business with a few people is that you don't micromanage and you let people do what they need to do. And
everyone's an expert in their area.
Right.
And I like it because I don't like laying things out for art.
Yeah.
I have ideas for products that I would write that are not really a roll for combat thing. They're just like a roll for combat wouldn't publish this because it's just a small product, but I would want to write it, but I'm not going to because I don't want to do the layout and the business stuff. And with us, it's a partnership where you do the layout and the business. I get the design and the words, and we work together on a bunch of other things, and it works great.
So, Nickerson wrote, Steven, tell us about the summer of 76. He thinks he's joking, but I'm going to tell you. So, I'll tell you about the summer
hungry,
of 76.
Steven.
And then we're going to leave, and we'll thank Anton.
I want dinner.
I'm starving too. So this is what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you. I remember when I was a kid in the year of 76, and everyone was talking about the centennial, and that's all people were talking about, the 200th anniversary of the United States, and fireworks all over the place, and that's all it was. Red, white, and blue everywhere. And I do remember watching TV, and there was just, and I lived in New York, so You had the Statue of Liberty they did special stuff for. I just remember a lot of patriotism in that summer. I was pretty young, though, but I do remember that. That's my big memory. I do remember the summer of 75, because that's when Jaws came out, and no one would go swimming, and everyone was scared to death. I remember that well. I was like, people, like, it totally destroyed the summer season. And it was the first blockbuster ever. And do you know why they're called blockbusters? I actually said this in an earlier show. Mark knows the answer.
I do not know the answer.
I'm not going to reveal it because Steven said it.
The reason they're called blockbusters is because you had to wait online to go into the theater because you couldn't buy tickets ahead of time, and there was usually only one theater, or maybe two at most, and people would have to wait online, and they would bust the block because the lines were so long. And they're blockbusters, and the first blockbuster was Jaws, and the second blockbuster, which you all know, was Star Wars. And after that, the term stuck. There you go.
Yep, that's it.
So now you know where blockbuster comes from. And I remember waiting on those freaking lines. I had to wait on that line for Star Wars. I had to wait on that line for Conan the Barbarian in 1982, 81.
So I have a question for you, Steven. That's where Blockbuster came from. Yes. Can you tell me about maybe Anto and Steven could help me with the UK versus US split of a movie that bombed? Why is a movie that bombed terrible in the US and great in the UK?
Which movie?
No, just if you say that movie bombed, then and maybe the slang has converged since the last time I looked at UK slang, which was a long time ago, but that movie was a bomb. I've heard of as being a positive thing to say in the UK, but in the US that would mean it was terrible.
No, I've only ever heard it in the negative.
Oh, okay. Maybe it shifted to converge to the US slang then.
The only thing I can think of it being in the positive was that movie was the bomb.
Oh, yeah,
the
bomb
feels more of an Americanism.
Right. Yeah, that is an Americanism.
Right. The bomb is not a bomb.
Yeah, like bombing seems like a very negative term for any piece of media's performance.
Or the bomb.
Okay, it looks like in 2006.
It's
saying that no, but not the bomb. The bomb is a relatively newer one, but it looks like in 2006 in the UK, saying that the movie was a bomb, not the bomb, just a bomb, was positive.
Oh,
but saying that a movie was a bomb is maybe negative in both places. Yeah. So it shifted towards the American version.
Yeah, I mean, in general, the UK is culturally like just the US, but 10 years behind.
In some ways, they're getting closer and closer, though. Every time I visit, it's the internet, man. Although I still will never get over you guys call flashlights torches, but I get it. I get why you call it a torch because it makes sense that it's a torch. But it is funny because it's fun. I like to say torch, but I say that
just
people here
picturing someone with a classic torch.
Right. Yeah. I love it. Well, for us, because it's D&D, it's like, oh, a torch. It's so cool. But here, you're like, huh? You say that, and people don't know what the hell you're talking about. By the way, my son does the best. He does a British accent so well that he would use it like in the UK and overseas, and people thought he was from there, and even Brits, because that's how convincing he was. And I was like,
in general, it seems to be much more difficult for Americans to do any British accents than vice versa. There seems to be something about the mouth placement that's more difficult for American accents convert into UK accents.
It could.
Which UK accent did he do, Stephen, your son? Because there's so many different
like a London,
variations.
Londoner.
London area?
Yeah, Londoner. Yeah. Well, he goes to camp. And all the camp counselors are from the UK, like all of them. So he would practice with them. And that's how he got so good. So it wasn't he did it on his own, and then he got really good at it. So I was like, okay, I guess that's what you're doing in summer camp. Great. Paying for you to learn how to speak like a Londoner. Great job. Are you sure UK is catching up and you aren't personally falling behind? No. And this is my very, very, very last story, is that when I went to France and London in like the year 2000, it really still felt like very European, and that's before the internet really got popular. No one had cell phones, and it really just felt incredibly European, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And I've been there since, and I went to Spain last year, and now with cell phones and the internet, it's definitely still has the architecture of Europe and the culture, but it is definitely all becoming the same. It's sort of kind of sad that it's all like, what was unique is no longer unique. And I'd say that in America too, because like Manhattan used to be, there was no like Walmarts or Kmarts or any marts or any big box stores in Manhattan ever. They were all unique, small mom and pop. Everything was mom and pop shops. And then I just heard like, oh, they're opening up a Wegmans, which is like one of the biggest, it's great supermarkets, like gigantic supermarket, one of the biggest supermarkets you've ever seen in Manhattan. And I was like, really? Kind of sad, and they opened up Kmart's in Manhattan. It's just like, everything's becoming the same. It's like, even Manhattan is like, well, oh well.
There we go. So everybody come tomorrow for a 1 hour shorter at longest GM core preview with the rules lawyer.
That's right. And if Anto ever has a cancellation in his game
that wasn't from him,
that wasn't from me.
I have 2 pieces of advice. 1, we'd love to have you on the show. 2, given that it sounds like you're going to sue them, Steven knows a lot of good lawyers.
You really hang out on
I do. And my lawyer was about to go after someone in the UK, and he was really excited because he was going to get to use UK law. So we didn't do it, but he was looking into it, and it got close. But anyhow, that's a whole other subject.
There we go. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, folks.